What's up, y'all? I see Angel is here already. Um, Thank you. I need to get some new music because I don't want to use this same one that Chad uses. What's up, Venus? What's up? God is our awesome defender. Let me get I gotta get my notes ready, y'all. I need to get my water too, right? Hold on. What's up?
What's happening, man?
What's good?
Oh man, ain't straight, man. My bad for being late.
I know you
I
good.
I didn't get off work till 9, so I was gonna try to jump, transition over from work to the show, but things kind of got caught up at work a little bit, so I wasn't able to, jump straight over. But I'm here now.
Oh no, it's good.
Yeah, man.
We good. About to get into Marcus.
The original great value. He was great value before we even knew what that meant.
Right.
But that's the thing, though. A lot of all these so-called black leaders, man, they not what you thought they were.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, but it's gonna be an interesting conversation for sure.
Let me say what's up to the people on YouTube. What's up, Angel again? What's up, Kenya? The Ice Cold Wolf. Venus again. Mika. Monafe Man. L Walk. Day Walk. Jahan, what's up? With the super sticker. Hello, Blanche and Chuck. Looking forward to a great show tonight, Ashe. I'm just telling folks to come over here. All right. What's up, Lisa? Casually Conservative, what's up? I had some videos too, Chuck. I want you to respond.
Okay. You
respond.
already laughing. You already laughing. I already know it's gonna be crazy.
Listen, it's funny though. Listen, this guy, man, he's always whining, man. He's
hmm
all
Speaking of whiners, I don't know if you talked to Chad, but I guess Chad finally just broke down and said, "Screw it, I'm gonna go ahead and bring what's my man's name? One of Iron Mitch's crew, man. I think he said Johnny Marbles. That's who it was. I don't know which one of them is Possum. I don't know if that's Possum or if that's somebody else, but yeah, Chad said, man, he's going to. Matter of fact, he told me earlier in the week that he was thinking about doing it Friday, which would have been tonight.
okay.
But I don't know, man. Of course, he's not just going to do some kind of freewheeling kind of Instagram type of deal, Instagram Live. He said he's gonna actually bring him on his YouTube channel and have a conversation with him because I guess dude is always sending Chad private messages, DMs, trying to entice him and kind of entice him into a conversation. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah.
Just being like, hey man, I bet you didn't know about this, and I bet you didn't that, and whatever. So yeah, I was like, all right, man.
A white man to promote jobs. Why don't you promote them? What's the
I mean it might be productive.
Well, it may not be productive. It shows that gonna be entertaining.
Yeah, it's gonna be entertaining. I'm just like because I just
It'll be entertaining for me for sure. I said, all right, Chad, man, do your thing, bro. But yeah, could I don't know, could be me. But I whatever. Chad said, man, as long as he comes in good faith, he'll have a conversation with him. But
come in good faith, man. He gonna come with the same. Like,
man,
listen, man, it would be different if he was gonna come on the show and at least have an authentic point of view. Like
listen, bro. You tell. I mean, like I said, I don't know who's who. I can't discern I can't distinguish their voices. I don't even know what these cats look like, except for the one guy who was out on a date with his wife, asking Cool
he,
Heen where you were. I don't know
he's
which
the
one.
leader. That's the
Okay.
leader.
Oh, okay. That's the leader. Okay. So yeah,
And
I can't.
I saw one guy. He was just like he was like had a thick neck. He's sweaty. He real sweaty. So he called himself Gagatron. It was
Ooh, that's kind
yeah.
of.
He had a weird.
That's a little freaky. I
I
don't know what
know
that
he had a
means,
weird. He had a weird Instagram name, man. It was
man.
some
Yeah. So I don't know who's who, man. But you talking about how whether you just saying it in jest or whatever. But when you talk about how you would kill me or would have to kill me if this and that. I mean, yeah, man, it'll be difficult for somebody in my position to even pretend. I'm not even going to feign, uh, politeness. We gonna get it on out the gate. You feel what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I don't know. Like, but what's all this talk about? You would have to kill me and how, remember that one time they was talking about how there should be a like a coon registry, sort of like you have a sex registry, and black folks should be alerted when a so-called coon moves into their neighborhood. The same way you can look up where all the sex offenders are in your neighborhood. There should be like a coon registry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I don't know, but we'll see if it happens, man. We'll see if it happens. So it's gonna be interesting.
So this video kind of puts me in the mind of those guys. Where this guy, I think he's a part of like the African Diaspora channel or something, but he's always giving reports about white, like he talks about white supremacy all the time. That's it. He just talks about white supremacy, being oppressed. Like it's nothing ever of anything of them actually just living life and trying to be productive. It's always in opposition to white supremacy. But he ran up against Jesse Lee. And I like Jesse Lee for this reason, because he doesn't, he don't fold with these people. He just keeps the same, countenance, same line of questioning.
Yep. He run the same plays.
Same play.
Same Packer sweep, man. It's gonna work.
Yeah, right.
It's like Novocaine.
So thank you again, Jahan, for the super sticker. We appreciate it. I'm gonna play this video though. Hold on.
Okay.
Why do you need the white man to promote jobs? Why don't you promote them? What's different about the white man than you?
Oh, let's see. He stole everything he has. He got 240
What has
years.
he stolen from you?
Free labor from black people.
What has he stolen from black
country.
people today?
Oh, he stole our culture. He stole our language. He stole our heritage. He stole our labor. He murdered and slaughtered our children, our babies, our women, our men. Do we need to continue stolen inventions that we couldn't patent because they created a patent office?
What's your language that they stole?
The different African dialects they stole. We didn't come here speaking English.
But white people speak English. They don't speak African dialect.
So, when we came,
so you came off the ship speaking black stuff?
What is black stuff? It's African languages.
Yeah, you came off the ship speaking that.
My ancestors did.
What's preventing you from speaking it now? All you do, learn it and speak it. No one cares.
What's preventing me from speaking it now? Because number one, we lived in a colonized society. We speak a colonized language, and so unfortunately, we have to teach our children English.
Why is it that black men such as yourself don't feel embarrassed publicly complaining about white men and how they hold you back? And you got all these excuses. Normal men don't have excuses.
That's funny, normal men. I would love to hear your explanation of normal men. But the thing is this.
Men who are not like women. We should.
Let me do
this. So, Chuck, well, I just want to say one thing before I let you go. I just thought it was funny when he asked him, why can't you learn these languages now?
Right.
Like, what stopped you from learning them now? And this man said, because of colonialism. Like you can learn the languages now. Like you can do it. Like clearly you can do it now. You can learn all of them. Swahili, and when people do little click noises, you can you can learn all that stuff. Listen, that can be learned today. So I'm like, what's holding you back? But go ahead.
I mean, I don't really have much to say, man. It's just those, same old tired talking points, that Marcus Garvey was putting out back in the 1920s. And we're going to get to it, but it's one of those situations where it's like, man, what am I supposed to say, man? Like that. It's just so stupid. It's so just shallow and just hollow and just trite. And, man, what can you say? They stole that. He stole that. Who's he, man? Who's this proverbial white man you keep talking about, man? A different type of. Come on, man. Come on.
I just thought it was funny that he was asking him basic common sense questions, and he just couldn't. He said, "What has a white man done to you today?" And this dude went back to the. I don't know. I think it's just funny. There's just a tactic. Like they just keep going. Like it's almost like you can't argue history if it's something that took place. You know what I mean? Like you can't argue a past atrocity. Even like Marcus Garvey and all them, they all have the same historical foundational talk. You can't really argue with it because they're going to say like, okay, this happened. Okay, it happened, but we're living in the present time. So what about today? And it just always seems like
Hmm.
they can't let the past go. I know it's a tactic, but
Yeah, they can't let the past go, man. And that's to the extent that they even know about the past. You know, a lot of this stuff is just, just talking points, man. Somebody in the chat said, I guess my man got outed not too long ago. This guy right here, that he got a white wife. I don't know how true that is. I don't even know
oh,
who
you
that
know
guy
what?
is. I've seen him
Oh,
before, though. I've seen him, but I remember seeing that full. I think I watched the full interview with him and he and Jesse Lee Peterson. I think I saw the whole thing. So I've seen his face, but I don't know anything about him. But yeah, man, like somebody just said in the chat, man, just about my response to your question. Like, I'm just burnt. I don't know, bro. I'm burnt out, bro. I just don't know what to say to these. I just don't know what to say to that no more, man. I
I
just
saw his wife, and I don't know what she is. She actually looked Mexican,
okay,
um,
okay.
but I really couldn't tell what she was. But she's kind of like that ambiguous, you know.
Matter of fact, I think that man came out during that talk. The what you're playing that not the whole at some point during the conversation is what I'm trying to say. I think that came out that I think his wife is like Hispanic or I don't know Spanish speaking
Okay,
something I don't
okay.
know. But yeah, I think that came out during that conversation. Jesse Lee Peterson was asking him about it. How come his girl wasn't black? How come his wife wasn't black? And of course, he came up with some screwy explanation to try and
Oh, I can only
justify.
imagine. I can
Yeah,
only imagine. Oh my goodness.
yeah. They stole and they this and they that. It's just like man, like you said, Blanche. I can't even connect it. I can't even put those two things together. I can't even draw a line to what you're saying and make it connect to the present.
I can't.
I can't. But what I can do is, I can see why, and I don't know what this guy got going on in his personal life. I get that he's just talking about, I suppose, black folks on average. So, or should we say the suffering, the struggling black folk, the ghetto poor, the black underclass. I know why they're in the predicament that they're in, you know, uh,
Right.
because they believe in the same lies as you do. They believe the same stuff that you spew. Therein lies the problem. So
So
can't
I
hold it.
actually, yeah, she's I'm looking at her. Yeah, she looks Mexican.
Okay.
I mean, listen, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying if your whole if all your content is about the African diaspora and you a pancake Africanist, then your wife needs to be, I'm sorry, your wife, she needs to be a queen. I'm sorry, she needs to be
Right.
fresh out the pyramid. I'm just saying.
Right. Right. Fresh out the pyramid from when the Africans reigned over ancient Egypt,
Yeah.
for that brief period, whenever that was, but yeah, yeah. There was a
But
time, I think there was a time when Egypt was at its heights that they had a black monarchical class, but they were deposed after a short period of time and driven out. I forgot the name of that era of that era in dynastic Egypt where there were black pharaohs. I think it was the first one of note was I think it was Taharka. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, man. But yeah, they
well,
need to be.
they came out with a Budweiser came out with a series when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and it used to show you like all the great people of Africa,
Hmm.
and they made all the pharaohs black, but they made like Nefertiti light skin. She looked kind of like Janet Jackson, and then they had somebody else looking like
Hmm.
another brown skin artist. But anyway, they had a whole series of
Hmm.
showing you that the pharaohs were
Right, right. Yeah,
black.
like Rick Hempstead just said in the chat. He said it's the Kushite kings of the 25th dynasty. So I
Okay.
could take my man Rick Hempstead's word for it. He's pretty informed, and that sounds about right to me. The 25th dynasty sound about right.
You said how long did they last?
They didn't last that long. They were driven out and removed. They were interlopers. Even if you anyway. I ain't talk about ancient Egypt and whatnot. Because let these folks tell it. Like I said, the Cushites, the Nubians, they were black. The Egyptians were black. Therefore, the Semites were black. Folks of the Middle East and ancient, Mesopotamia, Syria.
Mm-hmm.
They were all black, blackety black. So anyway, man, what a waste. What a waste of time. What a waste of time and energy.
Okay, so we can get into it. I was watching a video earlier, and Judge Joe Brown claims that Marcus Garvey was set up by the Boule. And he said that he was being funded by Booker T. Washington. And then he said that, well, he's talking about he didn't like Booker T. Washington. But he's mentioning that Du Bois was against Garvey. And then I guess later on in his life, he switched and he was pro Garvey. But yeah.
Yeah, there was a time when they were butting heads with one another because Garvey was upset with Du Bois and by and large the NAACP because they were striving for, I forgot the exact term that Garvey used to describe it, but he talks about institutional equality.
Mm.
He talked about how it was foolish for the black man to want, equal treatment from whites. He'd be much better off if he, went and got his own. Now, I know what a lot of folks are thinking. Plus, Garvey, he sort of saw the writing on the wall when it came to men like Du Bois and the NAACP and who was really behind the NAACP. So a lot of folk, when they hear Garvey say something like that, they say, okay, that's cool. That makes sense. He's talking about being self-sufficient. He's talking about, black folk doing for themselves, and as opposed to, trying to kick the door into, quote unquote, white society, right? What's wrong with that? But that's one would only come to that conclusion if they sort of looked at Marcus Garvey and actually read. As a matter of fact, I spoke about it last time and I didn't have it, but I went and dug it out today. This is the opinions and philosophies of Marcus Garvey. And I'm, when the time is right, I'm going to read directly from the opinions and philosophies of Marcus Garvey. I have a copy of the Centennial edition. This was published in 1987, republished. So I'm going to read from this. It has a preface from Tony Martin too. I mentioned Tony Martin in part one of the conversation that we had about Marcus Garvey. But Marcus Garvey he's like many of so-called black conscious folk, black leaders, and so on and so forth today. Marcus Garvey doesn't know anything. Marcus Garvey doesn't understand or did not understand how the world actually worked. And you're going to find out he didn't once I really, really start getting into the thick of it. But he and Du Bois, they clashed. They clashed, and going back real quick, let me mention this too, that the first live stream that I had on YouTube with Chad Jackson, Pan-Africanism got brought up. And it was funny because I remember Chad made a reel out of it and we collaborated on it. And I'm talking about how Pan-Africanism is just, what I would call Afro-Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Marxism with this sort of Afrocentric tinge or to make it look more fashionable to blacks. They dressed it up in this sort of African kind of a aesthetic, or to try and massage your sensibilities. And I remember somebody in the comment section talked about how, they made a comment. They said, well, no, actually Garvey was an anti-communist. Marcus Garvey were against the communists. And I laughed when I saw that, and I didn't even feel the need to respond to the person, because if you're trying to justify the fact that Marcus Garvey was not a communist by simply saying that he said that he was against the communists, then you don't really understand how communists work. Not only do you not understand how communists work, you don't understand what communism is, because one doesn't have to even, I guess, consciously know that they are in fact a communist in order to be one, if they have a skewed outlook on life, on people, and on society. That's number one. And number two, quite frankly, communists lie. They lie all the time. It's in their ideology. It's in the DNA of what they believe, that in order to successfully promote and secure this revolutionary future, they have to be clandestine. They encourage it. So, even if someone says that they're not a communist, you should really dig 2 and 3 and 4 steps deep to find out if they are in fact who they say they are. So say, oh, he's the anti-communist. Yeah, he said he was, but we're gonna get into what he really believed, what he really thought.
So my question is, I thought it was odd, and I may just play the clip of Judge Joe Brown saying that Booker T. Washington was funding Marcus Garvey. Well, first he said that Booker T. Washington believed that Black people should just not strive for anything and just do what just stay where they were and just be happy. That's literally what he said. He said his grandfather hated. He said his dad hated him. He said nobody, I think he said both his dad and somebody else didn't like him, because basically he wasn't teaching Black people to strive for anything. But I thought that was strange. I was like, well, then why would he fund? It don't make any sense. Like, why would he give Marcus Garvey money if he didn't believe in Black people excelling? It don't make any sense to me. I don't know.
Not only why would he give Marcus Garvey money, because there was like this triumvirate. There was a relationship of sorts, or a kind of connection between the three of them: Du Bois, Garvey, and Booker T. But more it'd be, I think, more precisely to your point. Never mind the fact that he was helping to fund Garvey's efforts. If he were against Black folk doing anything for themselves, then how would Judge Joe Brown explain Booker T's own successes? How could he explain Booker T's own life and the things that he talked about, things that he said, and the organizations that he led, and the institutions that he founded, so on and so forth? I mean, anyway.
Yeah, when he said it, I was like, I said, that don't sound right. I said, that don't. And then he said basically that the Boule ran a smear campaign against.
Smeared him by saying what?
Hold on a second.
Oh, you about to pull it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it'd be better for you to hear what he actually says, and then you can just.
Okay.
You'll be able to just pick apart what he's talking about. I just know when he started off, I was like, this don't make any sense. But
okay, I
know Judge Joe Brown get to talking sometimes, and he
he says a lot of things that don't make sense.
Yeah, he just hold on. All right, here we go.
Had been born in the family of W.E.B. Du Bois necessary to get what we want. Booker T was in his prime. So
hold on. Thank you, Sneakerhead, for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Dead or Alive, thank you for the super sticker. Thank you, gentlemen, for trying to combat all this nonsense that keeps us divided. Amen. I'm gonna play these clips real quick for Chuck.
hated Booker T. Washington. Children are good, grand of recent propaganda making Booker T. Washington a hero, but essentially he was not talking about Black folks developing vocational skills. It's just be satisfied wherever you are. And if you're good, your children are good, grandchildren are good, then your great grandchildren may benefit from some grateful white folk and they may get benefits. That's the way it was taken. My grandfather hated Booker T. Washington's guts with an intense passion. Both of them did. And they were, to an extent, contemporaries. They were in their 50s when Booker T was in his prime. So there is that family history I disclosed. But W.E.B. Du Bois was the person that was saying we need to essentially lead a revolution and use force even if necessary to get.
No.
Now, listen.
No, yeah, you caught it, didn't you?
I stopped it right there. Hold on, man. Listen. Nah. Even I know that. Nah, come on, man. Go ahead, Chuck.
Man, well, you know, this is hard to reconcile because I get Judge Joe Brown. He's an entertaining, you know, he's kind of one of those old men you just like to sit around and listen to, kind of tell stories. You know, he may make you laugh. You know, especially when Judge Brown, you know, get to going, he start cussing and wilding out, you know. But I've heard Judge Joe Brown say a lot of things that were completely off the wall. Oh yeah, let me say this real quick before I really get into it, because this here, what you're playing is a clip from a show with a young lady. Her YouTube channel is called The Real Dana. As a matter of fact, Chad O. Jackson has been on The Real Dana's show a couple of times. I know you all may have noticed. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right here and now. So guys, look forward to this in the coming weeks. That Dana reached out to Chad, and she wants to bring Chad on to have an open debate / discussion over the life and legacy of James Baldwin, because she took up issue with something Chad posted about James Baldwin and some of the things that Chad has been saying about James Baldwin. And she asked Chad if, you know, or offered the opportunity for Chad to bring on a partner. So I guess, you know, to have this debate on her show about James Baldwin. So Chad gave me a call, and before he can even ask me, I said, bro, say no more. So Chad and I, in the near future, will probably be on this lady's show to debate the life and legacy of James Baldwin. So I can't wait for that. But
now, Chuck, now why would y'all go on this? Now listen now. Y'all know Dana is not equipped to deal with two of the Avengers. You know good and well.
No.
Come on.
I know, man. I know I'm gonna feel like a bully, but I gotta do it.
You about to ruin her. Listen, her whole existence is gonna be shattered when she finds out, which she should already know about James Baldwin anyway, but when she finds out,
she don't. She told Chad, I'm sorry, I don't want this to sound like gossip or anything like that. But you know, she was like, you know, Chad, you know, you can't say those type of things about James Baldwin. You know, James Baldwin is one of those guys, you know, criticize. James Baldwin is, you know, she thinks James Baldwin was a great guy. He did all these great things for civil rights and what have you. And so she wants to bring Chad on to defend his stance on James Baldwin. And she said, you know, I would like to, you know, also extend the opportunity to someone who you like to bring on with you. So that way, you know, and I think she said Judge Joe Brown is already also has his seat reserved at this table. So it's going to be very interesting. Very interesting.
If you all see this, Dana and Judge Joe Brown, I'm just telling you all to just, if I was you all, I wouldn't do it because you all, you know, it's red pill or blue pill. And in this case, it's going to be red pill. And, you know, Morpheus had the red pill and the blue pill in either hand but it's gonna be Chad with a red pill and Chuck with a red pill. So y'all
Mhm.
options are, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I gotta watch that because that's gonna be,
Oh man. Oh man. I'm gonna make sure you know about it. You know.
oh my
But
goodness.
my boy Khalil said try to keep you. I'm gonna keep my cool, man. I ain't gonna do it like that. But
No, it
no.
ain't gonna be, listen, I can guarantee it's not gonna be Chad or Chuck. It's going to be, I know she gonna get listen, they gonna get emotional. I know that, listen, I know they're gonna get emotional. They might walk off, the show and leave it on, just leave the room or leave the podcast running. I don't know.
Right. Right. It'd be our show then, but no.
Yeah, right. Let y'all talk.
Let us talk, man. But yeah, he like he said, one of Booker T. Washington's. I mean, the overall sort of, I guess you could call it his just philosophy when it came to the black race in the United States was to cash your bucket down where you are. You hear folks say it, you hear that quote all the time when it comes to Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington was not about you staying in one place. And then by the time what did he just say? Your great grandchildren, maybe the white race or the white man will decide to finally give you something. I mean, that is one of the most skewed, corrupt, incorrect assessments and appraisals of Booker T. Washington I have ever heard. When he said what he said about, and I don't try to pull the age card on me. Don't talk about your grandfathers and whatnot. I'm not intimidated or at all. I'm not going to defer to someone who's older if they say something that is completely erroneous, because that is ridiculous, Mr. Brown. With all due respect, but what he said about W.E.B. Du Bois, he just wanted to revolt and just wanted to completely take the system over. I mean, at what point did that occur? Would have been my question to Judge Joe Brown, but Dana doesn't know enough about W.E.B. Du Bois to even ask Judge Joe Brown the correct question. She just
Right.
going to sit there and let him drone on, because there did come a point in the late, I can't remember the exact year it took place, but there was a point sometime during the early 1960s when W.E.B. Du Bois finally decided to renounce his American citizenship and join the Communist Party. He joined the Communist Party in 1961 at the ripe old age of 93. I
Wait,
believe
whoa. He became a communist.
W.E.B. Du Bois became a communist in his 90s. He became, he openly joined the party. But W.E.B. Du Bois had been a communist his entire life. In terms of, he was a small c, as they called them, small c communists in terms of his ideology, but he officially joined the Communist Party in 1961. As a matter of fact, I may still have it on my computer, but I actually had the archived New York Times 1961 article where it details it, because I don't know if it was the New York Times that broke the story. I don't know if it was an exclusive interview or article or what have you, but it was published in the New York Times in 1961 that W.E.B. Du Bois had finally joined the Communist Party, even took a trip to China. Speaking of our boy Chad O. Jackson, if you all have seen Uncle Tom too, you were fortunate enough to see the grainy old black and white footage of W.E.B. Du Bois alongside Mao Zedong. So yes, so in that sense, W.E.B. Du Bois did want a revolution. He did want to take the system over. But then, of course, that begs the question, who are the forces that were and are really behind the NAACP?
Right.
And what was their goal the entire time? Because the NAACP were at loggerheads with various with the communist factions in the United States as well. As a matter of fact, the NAACP took vast strides to try and purge its ranks of Communist Party members. Anyway, that's a whole another story. But it's not this sort of straightforward narrative. in the early from about, I mean, the 1900s on to, you know, the 1960s, 1970s. I mean, it's like this tangled web of palace intrigue, and it's not, the narrative is not, it's not a straightforward narrative. You have to really untangle the strings, because there's a lot of strange bedfellows when you talk about that period in American history.
I just think it's weird that he said that, because I remember doing a paper in college, and like I said before, I got a B on the paper because my professor was like, because I did it based on, it was comparison between Booker T. Washington and Du Bois, and my paper was based on Du Bois was the one really talking about assimilating into white society, you know, and then having the talented tenth. I didn't really think about a revolution.
Right. See,
Booker T. Washington was talking about more of, you know, even entrepreneurship. I know he talked about if there's a white metropolis, there should be a black metropolis. Like, he was very forward thinking back during that time. So what Judge Joe Brown said about him in this clip is false based on what I read, because that's not what I read about him at all. Matter of fact, it got me a B on my paper because I made it seem like Du Bois was the sellout and Booker T. Washington was the one that was for the people. But, you know, we had an argument in his office about that. But anyway.
nah, right. Yeah. You know, again, W.E.B. Du Bois, he kind of had this, because you have to think there was a time in America where, you know, if you were a, you know, hardcore Marxist, you sort of had to play things a bit soft. You had to play things a bit quieter, because to come out openly as a communist, you know, you would literally and legitimately risk losing it all.
Yeah.
You know, your employment, you know, all sorts of things. And so you had a lot of you know, hardline communists who were sort of hiding in the shadows within a lot of more, you know, socially acceptable organizations, you know, like the NAACP. But you know, over time, you know, Du Bois would you know, eventually take the mask off, because, you know, he can no longer pretend to be this reformer. He can no longer pretend to be this moderate. Here's another, remember, show. This was last time, a couple of weeks ago. This is a book here, Explorations in Classical Sociological Theory, and I'm just going to dig in. And if you can see, you know, there you have the eugenicist Charlotte Gilman here. There's Karl Marx, W.E.B. Du Bois. I believe that's Emile Durkheim, and I believe that's Herbert Spencer. Now, they have a whole entire section in this book dedicated to W.E.B. Du Bois. And from 1934 to 1944, Du Bois left the NAACP in a disagreement over assimilation versus separation. He returned to Atlanta University. In 1935, he published Black Reconstruction, an essay toward a history of the part which Black folk play in the attempt to reconstruct democracy in America. This is from 1860 to 1880. And this is considered by the author of this book to be a Marxist interpretation of the Reconstruction. Let's go on here. In 1944 to 48, he returned to the NAACP, ended in disagreement, continued disagreement, and moved toward the political left. So from 1944 to 1948, he rejoined the NAACP, but he left in 1948 over further disagreement, and he would leave and he would drift further to the left because the NAACP wasn't radical enough for Du Bois. Remember, I said moments ago that the NAACP, or so it pretended to, put forth this valiant effort to purge the communists from his ranks. And W.E.B. Du Bois, of course, as we would soon find out, was a fellow traveler. He indicted as another.
You tell them what traveler means?
Fellow traveler. So what that was, you know, that's just a term that, you know, communists use, you know, in the United States to describe one another, you know, without, you know, sort of being like, you know, I'm a member of the party, or I am a communist sympathizer. Some folks were fellow travelers, and sometimes you could be a member of the Communist Party USA, and they still consider you a fellow traveler. But some folks were just called fellow travelers if they were just communist sympathizers. It's interesting because, again, man, you got to really know the layers, because it's not straightforward. A communist strategy they would do is they would oftentimes not allow their more public supporters to actually become members. Why? Because they feared that those who became members would be the first to be subpoenaed.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that it would expose the party if men like W.E.B. Du Bois and MLK or whomever openly came out as members of the Communist Party. They wanted their members to remain underground, and they were fighting this ongoing war underground. And so that's sort of like a code word or phrase they use to describe one another. They call themselves fellow travelers. Oftentimes, members of the Communist Party, if you were serious, it's sort of like, Muslims, at least they have to make at least, one Hajj, in their lifetime. They have to go to Mecca to do the circumambulation around the Kaaba or whatever. Communists would have to do the exact same thing. The Mecca of communism was the Soviet Union or Russia. And so all the communists around the world had to make their sojourn to Russia. And many of them who went to Russia went there to study for a time at I forgot the exact name of it, but it's a school or university that's named after Vladimir Lenin. And the entire purpose of the school was to teach their communist operatives from other countries how to engage in subterfuge in their own nations. And so you had to travel to the Soviet Union. So, they got the term fellow travelers. A lot of,
I thought you were gonna say they were Masons.
but it's funny because when I said the word, when I said that fellow travelers one time, and somebody had asked me, what does that mean? And then I remember I was live somewhere, and somebody in the comment section was like, that's Mason. They're talking about Masons.
That's what I thought.
Now that may be something that Masons say to one another. I know they consider themselves to be widow's sons. So if you ever see or Mason, if he suspects someone else is a Mason or sees them, they always supposed to be secret, right? But they're always wearing little chains and they put little decals on their cars or whatever. And so if you want to sort of give a fellow Mason a wink and a nod, if you're in trouble and you need help, you say, is there no help for the widow's son? And they say, oh, okay, you must, you're one of us. And
Right.
so, but I mean, don't get me wrong, man, there could be some, some connections between some powerful Masonic lodges and, folk that were, high up in the movement at the time. I'm willing to consider it, but the term fellow travelers in this context, we're talking about, people that were working on behalf of the Communist Party. But again, it could have two meanings. I'm willing to consider it, But no, so just finishing up, so I had the year right. In 1961, he joined the Communist Party and moved to Ghana, and he continued to work on his long-term project, the Encyclopedia Africana, and he renounced his American citizenship in 1962.
So in other words, he became a communist, officially when he had left the U.S. though. So he was kind of like old and left the U.S. So I guess there wouldn't be really any type of repercussions
Right.
for him joining the party.
Right.
Kind of like, come out, like I liken it to like somebody that was in the closet all those years and then they come out the closet and they when they're like 90 years old, I'm like, well, it's over with now, what I'm saying? I don't know if
Right. Now, somebody in the chat said, Masons asked, "Are you a traveling man?" That's
Yeah.
the code they ask one another. So, you know,
Let me play this. I'm gonna go back to this because I really want you to.
oh yeah, okay, cool, cool.
Get what we want. Booker T was saying, be satisfied with what you have, be nice. That's been modified, and each generation it flips back and forth to an extent. Now, Marcus Garvey was sponsored by Booker T. Washington. So that made him an enemy of W.E.B. Du Bois. And what's going on is there's a lot of animosity that developed because at the time all of this was going on, 1914, there were some people like me who had been born in the 5th decade of the preceding century who were in their late 60s, early 70s, and they were either in the Caribbean or in the United States. And what happened is in the 1840s, the Maroons in Jamaica, and prior to that, within their father's lifetime or slightly before, Toussaint Louverture had gotten Haiti free from the French. So those people looked down as just embarrassments upon American, mainland American Black folk is less than less for having to be freed by Massa Lincoln and the Civil War rather than getting themselves free. So people who were
So y'all hear that, y'all? Y'all hear that, black folks? So the people of Haiti and other blacks throughout the Caribbean, they look down on us. They look down on y'all because Massa had to set y'all free. Wait, what? Oh, okay. Because see, Toussaint, he had it right. Toussaint had it right. That's why Haiti has been a basket case of a nation ever since. You see, this is the problem, and this is the problem with, I'm sorry, old holdovers from a bygone era like Judge Joe Brown, because he's fixated on that color demon. But I just want to go, I had to mention that because, you know, I mean, seriously. So the Haitians they look down on blacks in America as if they're in a position to be envied. Like I'm supposed to envy them and wish I was a Haitian or wish I was a Cuban. Because this is another thing that I thought of when he said that. Because remember when Marcus Garvey tried to garner support for his UNI organization in Jamaica, it kind of went off with a whimper. It didn't really take off until he moved to the United States. But according to the other book I showed you the other day, and I probably won't talk about Rastafarianism tonight, but the Jamaicans weren't as high on Marcus Garvey as some of the other islands in the region, say like Cuba, where the Afro-Cubans had a very high, opinion of Marcus Garvey, more so than even in his native Jamaica. But yeah, Toussaint Louverture, all you have to do is go and do a cursory historical analysis of Haiti from the time they revolted up until the 20th century. The first time that Haiti ever had some semblance of political stability, it wasn't until the ascension of the now infamous Francois Duvalier. If anybody doesn't know who Francois Duvalier is, he's known more so probably by the nickname of Papa Doc. And Francois Duvalier terrorized the people of Haiti for decades. And when I say decades, because once Papa Doc died, his son took over I forgot his son was called. They called his son something, and the reason why they called Francois Duvalier Papa Doc was because, believe it or not, I believe he attended the University of Michigan, where he earned some sort of degree in medicine, and he took his talents back to the island of Haiti, and he was using Western medical treatments to cure the superstitious peoples of Haiti, who began to believe that he had magical powers. And that is part of what led to Francois Duvalier's political success, is because the peoples of Haiti began to worship him as a god. As a matter of fact, I know you remember the wrestler Papa Shango.
Yeah.
His there's a deity in voodoo lore. I'm trying to remember the name of it. And they believe that Francois Duvalier was the reincarnation of this voodoo deity, and he would use that to his advantage. He would try to dress with the black hat, and deliberately tried to look Baron Samedi. Baron Samedi is the voodoo deity who he fashioned himself after, and the peoples of Haiti believed that he was the reincarnation of Baron Samedi. Anyway, yeah, somebody in the chat just said that it was Francois, his son. They called his son Baby Doc. So from Papa Doc to Baby Doc. Even Papa Doc even took credit for the death of JFK, because he said that he had put a curse on JFK, which led to JFK's assassination. So anyway, you had the peoples believing that he was this god. And just anyway, another a great black leader, ladies and gentlemen. But again, that's just the culmination of nearly 2 centuries of political dysfunction in Haiti as a result of this revolution. A lot of people don't realize that things can actually go from bad to worse. It's not simply a matter of revolting just for the sake of revolting. What exactly are you doing in this new society that you are erecting? What are the principles on which you are founding this new society? Because simply freeing yourself from French colonialism isn't going to necessarily bring you freedom and or prosperity. Just ask many of the African countries and many of the Asian countries, once they threw off their colonial rulers, they went the way of racial homogeneity, tribalism. They went the way of social planning and these various things, and it just didn't work out well for them. So anyway, Toussaint Louverture is not he's no one to necessarily praise, especially again when you know the history and what actually took place during that revolution and how vicious and how brutal it was. There was nothing honorable in Toussaint Louverture or Jacques Dessalines, the man who succeeded him.
The guy, Baby Doc, I guess they said that he was supposed to be immortal.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they say.
But Rick Hempstead said his math was bad because he died in 1971.
Now, I think that was the year Francois Duvalier died. His son, man, I'm trying to remember. I don't know. Y'all can help me out in the chat. I think that's when his father died. I think he took over in the 70s and he ruled over Haiti for a while. But, he may not have been as brutal and dictatorial as his father, but he was still a despot nonetheless. Or perhaps he was worse. But I know that Francois Duvalier is, he's far more infamous because, he was sort of like the first of his kind in Haiti. Again, prior to that, Haiti had saw maybe 20 some different presidents. countless assassinations and coups and overthrows, just complete and utter chaos, no stability, just complete and utter mess. You know, and that is not the legacy that the French left behind. That's the legacy that Toussaint Louverture left behind in his whole philosophy of Kopetet Bolekai. I know I'm probably butchering it, but it loosely translates into English as kill them all and take their heads, something to that effect. And so, you know, so many innocent people were maimed, murdered, killed, decapitated. You know, it was sort of like, you know, what you saw in France in the late 1700s. It's just that, you know, they didn't have a Napoleon to come along and restabilize the country. And it's just been a mess ever since.
Mm. Can you all hear me? I don't know why it's echo all of a sudden.
I don't hear no echo.
Yeah, I can hear it. It's weird. Maybe it's because this YouTube is open. Maybe. Let me see. Yeah, I don't know why.
Mm.
Let me say this. Yeah, they say it's bad.
Okay.
Let me refresh.
It's just me, y'all. Oh, I don't know what to do. All right, let's see.
Okay. Yeah, still.
You still echoing?
Yeah, I know touch is good. I don't know why I have to.
Dang.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, Rick Hempstead talked about how Haiti was stable for a moment during about 1910 and 1920 during the Banana Wars, but once the U.S. left, all hell broke loose again. Oh man, people don't get it, man.
No, they
But
don't
get it. Yeah, they blame white folks for everything. You know, people destroy themselves, man. The story is far more complex and complicated than that. But it's easy, you know, you can pick winners and losers or who the bad guys are, who the good guys are. You can dress it up and, you know, make it black or white, you know, pun intended, you know.
Chuck, do you have something open? What's on your end?
Let me see. No, I got the YouTube up playing just so I can look at the chat, but it's muted. You want me? I can close it down, see if it'll.
Try that for 1 second and see if that works. I don't think that's it.
I'm about to close it. All right, it's closed now.
No. Something is giving feedback. I don't know what it is. I almost feel like it's like two mics open. Can you hear it now? Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh.
Somebody asked Marcus Garvey uniform.
Oh well, you know, he was not. He was just another. Man, again, man. I mean, that's just your typical, kind of imperial. I mean, there may be some deeper meaning to it. You know, it may even be something esoteric.
Yeah.
But it's just, to me. I mean, at least on some level, it's just typical kind of imperial garb and regalia. You know, because Marcus Garvey fashions himself as some sort of messianic character or figure. There's another man.
Hold on
Hold on
one
one
second.
second.
Yeah,
Somebody
Somebody
said
said
if you
if
turn
you
your
turn your
speakers
speakers
down.
down.
turn my speakers down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I turned it down.
Let me
Let me
see.
see.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
I
still
can
hear
still
it.
hear it.
I don't know
I don't
why
know
it's
why it's
doing
doing
it. Because it
because it
wasn't doing
wasn't
it
doing it
before.
before.
But go
Well,
on
Go
ahead.
ahead.
like I told you last part one of the discussion,
Uh-huh.
Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey is a throwback. You know, he's a throwback to a forgotten era. He had no understanding of how the world really worked. And like I said, we're gonna get into it, man. It reminds me of, have you ever heard of I'm trying to remember what country was that? Oh man, I remember his name more so than I remember the country he governed. But there was an African dictator by the name of Jean Baudel Bokassa. And Jean Baudel Bokassa, he wanted to be the African Napoleon. And he had like a coronation ceremony. This was after they won their independence from, I think, from France, as a matter of fact. But he idolized the French, and he sort of saw himself as this African Napoleon, Jean Baudel Bokassa. And you see him all the time with the robes and the jewelry and the crowns and all that stuff. And he was deposed because he wasn't as, I mean, he was a dictator, but he wasn't as despotic as he was, I guess, arrogant and egotistical. I mean, because he was borrowing so much money and using and spending so much money for his lavish ceremonies and his cars and robes and clothes and all that stuff. I mean, he's quite the character. But yeah, he thought he was the Black Napoleon. And so he would always wear these elaborate outfits. So yeah, John Baudel Bokassa. He's an interesting guy. You muted, Blanche. Yep. It was the I had to look him up real quick. That's my man, John Baudel Bokassa. He was the emperor of Central China. He thought he thought he was an emperor.
Can you
Can
hear
you
me
hear me
now?
now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
it's
it's
the
the
input
input
volume.
Okay.
It's the
It's the
input
input
volume
Okay.
is the
It's the
problem.
problem.
Okay.
I don't
I don't
know.
know.
Testing.
But yeah, Marcus Garvey is the emperor of I don't know, man, this Pan-African panacea, this Pan-African Atlantis or Lemuria. I don't know what he envisions in his mind, but whatever it is that he envisions, he sees himself as the ruler of it. Because not only was Marcus Garvey sort of economically and politically illiterate, but he was also a tyrant. And again, I'm going to explain why.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to explain why. Just waiting for you to get your volume stuff together, and if you want to go back into the clip, we can finish out listening to what Joe Brown is saying.
Oh man, this gonna irritate me. Let me play
Let me
this
play
real
this.
quick.
Mm-hmm.
Alive. 20 years old happened were initially on. And there was animosity between the bloc who was embarrassed that we needed the Civil War for black folk to be free. They could not themselves free like the Maroons, etc.
Can you hear the echo?
No, I can't hear the echo. It's straight. I just had to move in a little closer to make sure I hear it real good.
Can y'all hear the echo? Somebody said, no way Marcus Garvey was a bad guy too.
Don't worry, y'all. We gonna get to it. We gonna get to it.
Okay. Everybody said you can hear the echo. Can y'all hear it now? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Rick Hempstead, you're right, man. You know, it was always little pop-ups and name changes, and it's kind of hard to keep track of what African country was what and when it was and all that. But again, Bokassa, he's just one of those characters that always stands out to me, you know. But yeah, you had a lot that were just like him. But he stands out.
It's still echoing. That's crazy. So maybe it's somebody said my speakers. Now can you hear it? I don't know. Still echoing? Yep. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. I'll just mute myself. Chuck, see if you can mute yourself and see if it goes away. Mute yourself. Is it echoing now? Do y'all hear echo? I don't hear the echo. Do you all hear the echo? Okay. So there's no echo when you're in. There's no echo. So I guess when I speak, you just mute your mic. He said you got to wear headphones. Okay, he's getting some headphones to see if it works. I don't know. We didn't have this problem last week, so I don't know what the problem is. I did the exact same thing. Let's see if it works with the echo. Let's see if it works with the headphones. Let me see. Okay. Now you gotta unmute yourself.
Can you hear me, Black?
I can hear you.
Are you echoing?
Yeah, you gotta just go through it, man. I guess when I talk, just try to mute. Just remember to mute. You're right, Khalil. It's the white man's fault. You're right. It is the white man's fault. So that's why I'm blaming white supremacy. I, 'cause, 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 ' There's some kind of feedback going on. All right, let me play this video, Chuck. You can open it up now.
etc., and the Haitians, etc., and the others that took Booker T's position. Now, you have Philip Randolph, and through him, you get into this thing with the black Pullman car porters. They were unionized.
Philip Randolph was a boule.
Yeah. Now, that was, okay, well, Pullman car porters, but you have to understand that at the time, outside of doctors, a few black doctors, very few black lawyers, and some others like that, the creme de la creme in the black community, Pullman car porters, chauffeurs, and butlers. So this black boule is very much opposed to somebody who is very dark skinned, heavy set, speaks with patois because he comes from Jamaica, man, and he's Caribbean, and he sweats a lot, and he dresses up in these posturing uniforms. And they accused him of what essentially would be today a Ponzi scheme. Right. I don't know whether it's true or not. It wasn't of that great a concern to me because Garvey was a footnote who basically confined himself to economics rather than to political consequence.
Man, somebody in the chat was like, "Yeah, you know, Judge Joe Brown is like your old uncle or somebody just talking smack at the cookout. You know, you don't take him seriously. You know, you just sit back and listen to him talk. You may laugh. You're like, all right, man, whatever, Unc. You know, and you kind of just give him a little shoulder, a little elbow bump, and you just keep it pushing. You know what I'm saying? Let me say, and this is not just to the folks that whose video we're watching. They probably ain't gonna watch us anyway, but and just for anybody, you know, it is important, at least this is my opinion. It's important that folk really dig in and start to understand things that are of serious consequence and not, I guess, to not get caught up in all of the sensationalism. For example, you hear the term boule and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, now all of a sudden you think you got something figured out just because you heard the word boule. I mean, I'm not saying that it's inconsequential, but I mean, you know, so many people sort of use that sensationalism as escapism, where, you know, again, you don't have to deal with things that are of real consequence. Forget the fact, I don't care who was a part of the boule and who wasn't in the boule. What did these men think? What did these men believe? What did these men promote? From Marcus Garvey to W.E.B. Du Bois to A. Philip Randolph. Yes, A. Philip Randolph, he had smoke with Garvey too. And A. Philip Randolph, who was connected to Bayard Rustin, who was connected to MLK, was a self-admitted socialist who was in bed and in league with communists. But A. Philip Randolph distanced himself from, I forgot the name of the organization that he headed up. Yes, that's what it was. A. Philip Randolph was the chairman of the first, what was it called? The national, I guess, what was it called? The Chicago Conference. I'll try to get it for you guys. I'll try to look it up. But again, when A. Philip Randolph found out that this Chicago-based sort of workers organization was a communist front organization, he attempted to distance himself from it. And so, once again, I said I go back. Weird, strange bedfellows, man. All of these men commingling and commiserating with one another. It's not easy to just say, well, he's a good guy, he's a bad guy, or he's this and he's that. It's again, man, it's multi-layered, it's multifaceted, and it's very nuanced, and it takes time, and it takes study, and it takes diligence to really get to the bottom of it all. And again, to speak of A. Philip Randolph, you know, he and Malcolm X had some correspondence. When this Sunday, I'm going to talk about Malcolm X's on the Cutting Through the Culture show. I'm going to talk about Malcolm X's correspondence with A. Philip Randolph. But you know, I just thought I'd just say that, man, like, you know, just to say the word boule. What I mean, what do you think, you know something, or you think that makes you smart because you pointed out the fact that somebody may or may not have been a part of been part of some secret society? What does that mean? You know, anyway, man, I just thought I'd just say that and throw that out. I knew it was one more thing that he said too that I want to unpack, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah. I wanted to say that he said that Boule didn't like him because he was black, fat, and he sweats a lot, and he spoke patois. I'm just like, no, it had to be deeper than that. It ain't just because he was sweaty and overweight. Come on, man. It had to be deeper than that. But he probably doesn't even know. He said he focused on economics, but clearly he was more than just economics. He was talking about, you know, black folks going back to Africa. You can go ahead.
But you got some more? You want to play some more of it?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just trying to find. Trying to find the name of that organization. That matter of fact, I could find it. Hold on. I'm sorry, y'all. I want to just get this information to you guys. Yes. So here's again. We here to talk about Garvey, but just briefly, A. Philip Randolph. This is something that is coming from my summary piece on MLK. I dedicated a segment of my MLK discussion on my YouTube channel to A. Philip Randolph, and I'm just going to read straight from it. It says, embodying the Communist Party's term from third period sectarianism to Popular Front coalition building, the National Negro Congress was the culmination of the party's Depression-era effort to unite Black and white workers and intellectuals in the fight for racial justice. And this marked the apex of party prestige in African-American communities. The NNC grew out of discussions initiated by communist delegates in the Joint Committee on National Recovery's conference in May of 1935 on the economic status of African Americans under the New Deal. J.P. Davis and Communist Party leader James Ford stressed the need to consolidate the strength of disparate organizations dedicated to fighting racial discrimination. Understand, this is key because, you know, part of undermining or sort of or toppling, quite frankly, the capitalist democracies, as the communists called them. They believed that blacks were central, blacks were key. You know, you had to sort of spark and initiate this racial consciousness within blacks, because blacks would play a key role in overthrowing the capitalist democracies. And I have some more information I want to get into, because I've actually pulled up some quotes from two men in particular, those men being Claude McKay, the famous Harlem Renaissance era poet, who was an attendee at the fourth Congress of the Communist International. And there was another man who and during the fourth Congress of the Communist International, they specifically spoke about Marcus Garvey and the impact of his UNI association. And there was another prominent black delegate at the fourth Congress of the Communist International by the name of Otto Haussmann. Otto Haussmann, he was in fact the first black member of the Communist Party USA. He was the Communist Party USA's first black member. But the Joint Committee on National Recovery Conference concluded by forming a committee of 60 prominent activists charged with organizing a National Negro Congress the following year. The result was an unprecedented confluence of civic, civil rights, labor, and religious groups from across the nation. In February of 1936, over 800 delegates representing 551 organizations and over 3 million constituents congregated in Chicago, Illinois for the first time. This is the NNC, the National Negro Congress, and A. Philip Randolph was selected as its president. He was a socialist, a labor organizer, and a civil rights leader. And of course, you know, this is the man who would mentor Bayard Rustin. And of course, Bayard Rustin is the man who would mentor MLK. Now they're saying that, you know, A. Philip Randolph did have issues with Marcus Garvey. As a matter of fact, A. Philip Randolph and Booker T. Washington are both spoken about in the opinions and philosophy of Marcus Garvey. But see, here's the thing. When you say, well, A. Philip Randolph was a socialist and he didn't like Marcus Garvey, so I guess that begs the question, you know, if Marcus Garvey was about his economics and socialists didn't like Garvey, then what did that make Garvey? What did that make him? Some free market, you know, who was he? The Black Friedrich Hayek? No, he wasn't. Marcus Garvey was a socialist himself. So what you have is, I mean, like you always say, Blanche, it's just confusion. It's just confusion and double-mindedness, man. Confusion and double-mindedness. So I could.
And I saw somebody mention that he basically, the folks he had working for him, I think they said in like Costa Rica or somewhere, that wherever he had his shop set up, what he was doing, because they said he was exporting tobacco or something. I don't know, whatever business he had, they said he was like, you know, treating his workers horrible. They said almost like, you know, very, I guess they said inhumane conditions, almost like I don't want to say a slave driver, but kind of like a slave driver, you know, very, not really wanting to pay a lot and wanting people to work a lot without, you know, a little pay.
Oh yeah. Marcus Garvey. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't pay a lot, because Marcus Garvey didn't believe that human beings should be paid. You know, he believed that human beings should only be paid a certain amount of money for the work that they did. And you're going to hear about it because Marcus Garvey said it in his own words. Marcus Garvey, one of the points, one of the 14 points of his then newly formed People's Political Party in Jamaica in 1929 was the promotion of a maximum wage. Garvey believed that, you know, human beings, their wages should be maxed out at a certain point, because capitalist greed, he stated, is what leads to foreign wars. This man, and this is one of the key communist talking points. They did this during World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. You know, wars are always instigated by the West for the purpose of enriching the capitalist class. And so that explains the imperial endeavors of the West and the United States more specifically, right? But communism, for example, is always in a defensive posture, because communism is always trying to defend itself from aggression, right? It's the West that's always the imperial, you know, aggressors. But there is no such thing as communist imperialism. There is no such thing as fascist imperialism. It's only the West. But Marcus Garvey would say similar things. If you think that wars are solely the consequence of capitalism and the exploits or the indulgences and the excess of businessmen, then you have a misunderstanding of human nature at its core. Because again, the only people on the left believe this. The only people on the left believe that all the things in life, all the ills in life, are motivated by property, thus the profit making incentive. And that's just not true, because human behavior is far more complex than that. It's not always a money issue. And it's not always, again, rich capitalist elites, going into foreign lands and, getting the people to, whatever. And so we can go and claim their resources. That's just commie pinko bullcrap. That's just talking points that they spew. And there's nothing substantial about it. But Marcus Garvey would say the same things. He would say the same things.
Hold on. So, I mean, if he believed that capitalism was the enemy and that people's wages should be capped off, I guess he don't believe in a free market enterprise, but he believes in reaping the benefits from it through his businesses. It's safe to say he was a communist. If he believes those things, and I believe he did, which to me is why he wanted all these folks to go to quote unquote Africa, I guess, so he could be the one in charge to, I guess, control this labor force. That's what I'm thinking in my mind.
I'm gonna move into Marcus Garvey himself, and I'm gonna read to you what he said. Also, if you go to the back of this particular edition here, you actually have an advertisement, and we'll probably get to this if time permits. I hope we do, because it's an important part of the story. When you're talking about smearing Marcus Garvey didn't have to be smeared by the boule or by anybody. Marcus Garvey smeared himself, because all the things that he did that we should abhor, he did them out in the open. This here in the back of the book is an advertisement for a book called White America. You probably can't see it. That book was written by a man named Ernest, or his name is E.S. Cox. E.S. Cox was one of the Virginia triumvirate that Marcus Garvey was closely connected to, who were all members of the Anglo-Saxon Clubs of America. There was E.S. Cox, John Powell, and we spoke about W.A. Plecker last week. But here you have E.S. Cox, a eugenicist and white supremacist. His book is being promoted in the back of Garvey's book. And people make excuses for why Marcus Garvey supported white supremacists, but we're gonna unpack it. So you brought up communism, and you brought up well, I think I brought it up, but you just mentioned, you kind of went into some detail. So here's what Marcus Garvey had to say about communism. Again, remember what I said. People say, well, Pan-Africanism has nothing to do with communism because, Pan-Africanism is synonymous with Garvey, and Garvey, he hated communists. All right. Well, let's see what he really thought. See, again, it's not enough for Marcus Garvey to say he doesn't like communists. What does Marcus Garvey believe? What does he understand about economics? He can be a communist without being conscious of the fact that he is one if he doesn't know what he's talking about. Here's what he said about economics, or what he said about communists.
Hold on one second.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's that book name again?
Talking about the book by E.S. Cox, or are you talking about this book here? The Opinions and Philosophies of Marcus Garvey. This is one of those, I guess, those quintessential must reads. If you want to get your, your black academic degree, or your black card, sort of like, the autobiography of Malcolm X, The Destruction of African Civilization by Chancellor Williams, Stolen Legacy by G.M. James. Those are just some of the books. Message to the Black Man by Elijah Muhammad. I got all that stuff. And, the Opinions and Philosophies of Marcus Garvey is one of the things that you have to own if you're serious about being a black, black scholar, a black intellectual, But here's Garvey, if I may. on communism. Here's what he says. It seems strange and a paradox, but the only convenient friend the Negro worker or laborer has in America at the present time is the white capitalist. Now, he says the only friend that they have right now is the white capitalist. The capitalist, being selfish, seeking only the largest profit out of labor, is willing and glad to use Negro labor wherever possible on a scale reasonably below the standard white union wage. Now, if you follow, we know how Thomas Sowell is. We love him over here in this ecosystem here. We love Walter E. Williams. Well, they both talk about how, the exclusively white labor unions at the time were in the business of. And the late Walter E. Williams talked about how, and Thomas Sowell as well, talked about how, when we first began to see, these sort of, I guess you would call it a federally mandated minimum wage, is when we saw unemployment amongst Black youth began to increase, because there was a time in the United States where, and of course, it depended on, where you were and, geography and whatnot. Me being a native of Detroit, unemployment at a time in Detroit was not an issue for Blacks. As a matter of fact, the average home ownership rate and income rate for Blacks in Detroit was higher than the median rate of home ownership and income for whites. In comparison, I mean, when I say whites, I mean the national average, not whites in the city of Detroit, but Blacks in Detroit were better off at a point in time in American history than whites on average, the country over. So what Garvey is saying here, and he's correct, he's saying that white capitalists would employ Blacks ahead of whites because whites unionized their wages. So collective bargaining left the white laborer stagnant. So the white capitalist overlooked his white brethren because he wanted cheaper labor. He goes on to say, he will tolerate the Negro in any industry except those that are necessarily guarded for the protection of the white man's material, racial, and assumed cultural dominance. If he accepts a lower standard of wage than the white union man, but if the Negro unionizes himself to the level of the white worker and in affiliation with him, the choice and preference of employment is given to the white worker without any regard or consideration for the Negro. Now, it may not dawn on folk when I listening to what I just read, but think about, mind you, he's talking about Pan-Africanism. He literally Garvey doesn't even realize what he's saying. He's saying that white people, in spite of this racial loyalty that he assumes that they have, they're willing to give a job to a Black person if the labor is cheaper and they can get productive work out of the Negro. So how can Marcus Garvey expect Blacks, on the other hand, to do what the white man isn't even capable of doing? Because it seems to me that the white man is more loyal to his profits than he is his race. Do you get what I'm saying? See, this just goes to show you that the free market is what, in fact, gives folks the opportunity for upward mobility. Because what employment does in this instance is it breeds familiarity, it breeds cooperation, it breeds teamwork. That's how you break down racial barriers. You break down racial barriers by getting folks who are of a different quote unquote race and getting them to work towards a common goal. What breaks down racism is cooperation through familiarity. And you must give them an incentive to do so, right? And the incentive to do so, in this case, when you're talking about the free market, is the profit incentive. What breaks down racial barriers is the free market, freedom of association, and willing cooperation, not political and social coercion through activism. Marcus Garvey is saying it here himself, that the white man chooses cheaper black labor. But yet he wants all black folk. So what makes you think a black person is going to stick together with the black race beyond his own, individual well-being when it comes to his resources, his time, his labor, his profits? Why would I choose somebody black if I'm not getting what I want out of the transaction? If the white man is loyal to his profits, then why shouldn't the black man be loyal to his? He just completely shattered the pan-European narrative in that one paragraph alone.
Can you read it again?
It seems strange and a paradox. It seems strange. Now, it's strange. He don't get it. But the only convenient friend the Negro worker or laborer has in America at this present time is the white capitalist. The capitalist, being selfish, seeking only the largest profit out of labor, is willing and glad to use Negro labor wherever possible on a scale reasonably below the standard of the white union wage. He will tolerate the Negro in any industry if he accepts a lower standard of wage than the white union man. But if the Negro unionizes himself to the level of the white worker and in affiliation with him, the choice and preference of employment is given to the white worker without any regard or consideration for the Negro. So here's what he's saying. He's saying, if I'm a white employer, white worker here, I say $10 an hour. I know $10 an hour was like, you was killing it back in the 20s. You was making $10 an hour. But let's just say $10 an hour, I got to pay the white man. They've unionized. So you're not going to be able to cross that, because you know how unions, you know how they were, you know how they are, shoot, even now, but back then it was even more intense, right? So if you in a unionized shop, you're not going to cross that picket line. Ain't no scabs getting in there. So the employer has to agree to pay all of us this $10 fee. Anybody willing to come in and undercut our labor bargain, say, I'll work for $9. The scab can't get through. So if all the white workers are collectivized and they're saying pay us 10, you got black workers that are saying I'll come in and I'll work less. Or say, for example, say if the white employer is racist and he's motivated by racism to the extent that he is forcing the black man to take less than the white man, because the white man, he's not willing to take anything less than $10, then I'll pay the black man $8. And the black man works and the white man doesn't work. But if the black man unionizes and he raises up to the level and he says, well, I want $10 too, then the white man is going to pick the white worker because he has no incentive to employ the black worker, because now I got to pay him the same amount. But I have an incentive to hire black over white because black comes cheaper.
So basically what I'm hearing is Marcus Garvey just said, don't unionize because you're going to cut yourself out. Accept cheaper labor. So basically what Judge Joe Brown said about Booker T. Washington is essentially what Marcus Garvey is saying, because Marcus Garvey is basically saying if you want to work, the quote unquote white man will hire you if you take less money. If you take less money, you'll always be able to work because they'll always look to profit more. So you'll always be in demand at a cheaper rate because he's not going to pick race over saving money on labor.
Over time, again, familiarity breeds, cooperation, familiarity. Eventually it grows into respect. And over time, respect can grow into friendship, and so on and so forth. And all the while, black laborers are acquiring more skills. They're becoming more trustworthy. They're showing their fellow Americans that they are dependable, that they're hardworking, that they're willing to work. They can show up on time. They can do the work. And then over time, a higher premium will be placed on your labor because the people who do the hiring know that, you have you've established yourself. You have a reputation of sorts. That's why when you show up to the labor market, you show up with a resume. Who are you? Your resume, that's your reputation. I trust that I can pay you X amount of dollars because your labor is worth this price because you are showing me your history. You're showing me your work. This is your resume. This is your reputation. And so over time, this is why if you study the economic work of Milton Friedman, this is why Milton Friedman has a ton of work where he talks about how collective bargaining actually stagnates wage growth. Unions don't necessarily increase wages. It doesn't increase the standard of living. In many instances, it actually stymies it. What leads to growth and access to wealth and access to resources is free market, of course, not collective bargaining. And again, we all know here in the chat that, of course, the unions or the workers were just Trojan horses to try and Sovietize the United States. So what Garvey is saying here, he's warning Black people, this is why you need to stay away from communists. Do not let them align you with their white Communist Front union organizations. Don't let them. Because when you become one of them, then all of a sudden the white capitalist has no incentive to hire you, like you just said, right? So you're probably thinking like, okay, all right, I'm with you there. I guess that makes sense, because why would you want Black folks to be aligned with communists? Okay, that makes sense. But then again, I had to point out the fact that what he just says betrays his own idealism, because you're telling me that even white racists have a price. They're not race loyal if they can get cheap Black labor. Then they don't care about their white brethren. So again, how are you expecting Blacks throughout on the continent and throughout the diaspora, Blacks dispersed all over the world? How do you expect, or why do you expect this race loyalty from them? Remember what Marcus Garvey called himself. Now, he called himself a fascist. He was a fascist before Hitler. He was a fascist before Mussolini. But then he goes on, he says, white unionism is now trying to rope in the Negro and make him a standard wage worker. Then when it becomes generally known that he demands the same wage as the white worker, an appeal or approach will be made to the white capitalist or employer to alienate his sympathy or consideration for the Negro, causing him, in the face of all things being equal, to discriminate in favor of the white worker as a race, duty, and obligation. So the white man only becomes obligatory to the white race when he got to pay the Black man the same amount he got to pay the white man. So again, Black, I'm trying to figure out, where is racial ethnic chauvinism and loyalty? Where does it rank when you start talking about someone's, and when you start talking about someone's property, their wages, their capital? That's their property. People are not willing to sacrifice what is in the best interest of themselves in exchange for racial loyalty. You got to force people to do that. If you don't force them to do that, again, you have to give them some kind of enticement. And it could be, people are loyal to their race and loyal to their ethnicity. Sure, I get it. But what Garvey is saying here indirectly is that people look out for what is in the best interest of themselves before they look out for what's in the best interest of anyone else. But he's a Pan-Africanist, though. But he says,
hold on one second. So basically, Marcus Garvey is really saying that white people or white supremacy is to an extent. There's a limit to where it could go, because once you reach a certain level, a white person isn't going to put whiteness above their own interest making money. So you're saying, then why would he expect black people do this to do that. It doesn't make any sense. Like you're like no, you're asking black people to be something that no other human being would be. That is, put their own interests behind the interests of, I guess in this case, the Black Star Line.
The collective. But then check this out now. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because this you get a little insight into what was going on in the 1920s, and keep in mind, you know, the 1920, this was the Communist Party of America was founded in 1919. This was 2 years after the Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government in Russia in 1917. Okay, and this began the so-called Red Scare in the 1920s because communists in America were being greenlit that the time was now, and that if Russia, you know, was able to carry out or spark this Marxist revolution by violent overthrow, because, you know, Lenin and his Bolsheviks were not popular. The peoples of Russia did not want that. But he, quite frankly, with his Red Guards, led by men like Leon Trotsky, they just, by violent force, just took the country over and took the provisional government over. Because, well, partly because the provisional government welcomed the Soviet dissidents and exiles back into the country. Because at this time, Vladimir Lenin, I believe, was living in Munich, Germany, not too far from Adolf Hitler, as a matter of fact. And Vladimir Lenin was living in Munich, Germany for about 17 years, he and his wife, and he was funneling his Marxist ideas and papers back into his native country. And then you had, communist agitators in the United States began to get extremely violent. You had attacks on, there was a Supreme Court Justice, Oliver Wendell Holmes. The communists tried to assassinate Oliver Wendell Holmes. Who else? They tried to assassinate John D. Rockefeller. I know we hear the name Rockefeller, we automatically think bad things, but I'm just telling you what it is, man. The communists in America tried to assassinate John D. Rockefeller. They also tried to assassinate J.P. Morgan, and a man by the name, he was an Italian communist by the name of Luigi what is his last name? Galliani. Luigi Galliani tried to assassinate Democrat Senator Thomas Hardwick. And the booby trap bomb that was sent to him was intercepted by one of his aides. And when she opened up the package, it blew her hands off. This man, Luigi Galliani, tried to assassinate. So there was all sorts of mayhem going on in the 1920s. So when you hear people talking about how crazy the 70s were and the 60s with the bombings and the domestic terrorism, you had a lot of that stuff going on in the 1920s as well. So keep in mind what was happening in the United States in the 1920s when Marcus Garvey is saying this. He goes on to say, I am of the opinion that the group of whites from whom communists are made in America, as well as trade unionists and members of the Workers' Party, is more dangerous to the Negro's welfare than any other group at present. Lynching mobs and wild time parties are generally made up of 99.5% of such white people. So here's what he's saying. He's saying that these lynch mobs and these wild time parties and all the terrorism and madness going on, especially the stuff that we see going on being carried out against Negroes, he believed were comprised 99.5% of white communists. This is according to Garvey. The Negro should keep shy of communism or the Workers' Party in America. Since they are so benevolent, let them bring about their own reforms and show us how different they are to the others. If the Negro takes my advice, he will organize by himself and always keep his scale of wage a little lower than whites until he is able to become, through proper leadership, his own employer. By so doing, he will keep the goodwill of the white employer and live a little longer under the present scheme of things. He even goes fundamentally, what racial difference is there between a white communist, a Republican, or a Democrat? So he's saying that. So in mind, I'm skipping around. Garvey's general attitude was that white communists, white Republicans, and white Democrats were all the same, because the system, as Marcus Garvey saw it and understood it, was the so-called system of white supremacy, and that the white communist is no better than the white Republican or the white Democrat. The problem is, and what the black man should be doing, once again, is trying to establish his own. Now, you want to hear what Garvey had to say about the Ku Klux Klan?
Hold
Hold
on
a second. Go ahead.
So Marcus Garvey just said, basically, don't bring your wage up to that of white people so that you can essentially always work for white people, or until you get your own, to be able to get your own. But if you get your own, is it still in the white system?
Because I don't even exactly know what that system would be to Marcus Garvey. I mean, I guess I do, because see, what is antithetical to the free market system? Well, the antithesis to the free market system is the planned economy, which is a more, I guess, African form of societal organization, I guess, according to him. When you listen to all these black activists, it always boils down to their hatred toward the free market. Go back to what Judge Joe Brown said about Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was urging people to stay where they are. Sounds like to me that's what Garvey was doing. But then he said, well, Booker T. was funding Garvey, and it was the boule that discredited Marcus Garvey. Well, let's say what Marcus Garvey had to say about some other things. These are his own words. He says, when he says they, he's talking about white communists. They have succeeded in enslaving the ignorance of a small group of so-called Negro intellectuals. This is his dig at Du Bois, whom they use as agents to rope in the unsuspicious colored or Negro people. They have become resentful and bitter toward the Ku Klux Klan. So he's talking about the communists are bitter towards the Ku Klux Klan. And they use the influence of their controlled newspapers to fight them, not because they so much hate the Klan where the Negro is concerned, but because the Klan, through an honest expression of the white man's attitude towards the Negro, prepares him to help himself. So Garvey is saying that the Klan prepares the Negro to help himself, because the Klan tells the Negro exactly how the white man feels about the black man. Communism is a deception, but the Ku Klux Klan is to be lauded and praised for their integrity, because at least they're honest. Between the Ku Klux Klan and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, give me the Klan for their honesty of purpose toward the Negro. They are better friends to my race for telling us what they are and what they mean, thereby giving us a chance to steer for ourselves than all the hypocrites put together, with their false gods and religions notwithstanding. I honestly, you may call me a Klansman, Garvey says. You may call me a Klansman if you will, but potentially every white man is a Klansman. As far as the Negro in competition with whites socially, economically, and politically is concerned, and there is no use lying about it. So Garvey said, you can call him a Klansman. That's how much respect and admiration he had for the Ku Klux Klan, because at least they're honest.
So my question is, and I'm gonna go back to the Klan first, the working. So Marcus Garvey is basically saying, work for the Klan, work for the racist white man, work for white supremacy until you're able to get your own. But in saying that he must trust that white supremacy is going to play fair. In his what he's saying, here goes my disconnect. You're saying that all white people are racist, all white people are the Klan. If that's the case, they would never let you get to a level where you build your own. They'd always keep you underneath them. But what he's saying is he's trusting that white people will allow black folks to work, build themselves up, and be independent. Then that kind of would mean they aren't really racist.
And it sure as heck wouldn't work to the benefit of Marcus Garvey's goals long term, because going back to what I said moments ago, that if you employ blacks over whites, they increase their attractiveness, their marketability on the labor market. They surpass the unionized white worker to the point where they become the preferable hire. Why? Because they're given an opportunity. The only thing that you need to do is be able to touch the first rung on the ladder to be able to pull yourself up. All whites are racists, Marcus Garvey said. Like I said, that's why I called him a throwback. I'll take this form of as a matter of fact, speaking of, let's just go here, since I just talked about the Ku Klux Klan and what Garvey had to say about them. This is Marcus Garvey speaking about the Anglo-Saxon clubs of America. Mind you, in the Anglo-Saxon clubs of America and Virginia were responsible for the implementation of something called the Racial Integrity Act. The Racial Integrity Act was meant to prevent miscegenation. What is miscegenation? It's a fancy way of saying blacks and whites having sex with one another and reproducing. Because Marcus Garvey believed in the purity of the black race. Go back to part 1 when I talked about how all of these folks were regarded Marcus Garvey, C.L.R. James regarded Marcus Garvey as Hitler before Hitler. Because Marcus Garvey believed in the purification of the black race. Because Marcus Garvey was born and raised in what is called the three caste system in Jamaica. And Marcus Garvey talked about how mulattoes and this and that and the third were treated better than darker blacks. So Marcus Garvey wanted to breed out, I guess, the recessive genome type, if that's the correct terminology, it's the correct biological terminology. He wanted to breed out the recessive phenotype out of the black race so that they could be phenotypically pure. This is why Marcus Garvey linked up with the Anglo-Saxon clubs of America. He even let John Powell give a speech before his UNIA organization, to the chagrin of members of his organization and other black leaders at the time that were saying, Marcus Garvey, what the hell are you doing? This is what Judge Joe Brown is talking about when he's talking about the boule, quote unquote, discrediting Marcus Garvey. I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. But you tell me, is Marcus Garvey being discredited? Does he have to be have his image and reputation tarred and feathered, or is he doing a great job? Is he doing it on his own? Here's what he says about the members of the Anglo-Saxon clubs. This is a quote. Members of the Anglo-Saxon clubs are honest and honorable in their desire to purify and preserve the white race, even as we are determined to purify and standardize our race. Now, Blanche, what the hell is a standardized Negro? What's a standardized black person? What is that?
A Democrat?
Right. Your guess is as good as mine, bruh. What is a standard? To standardize the race. And again, Marcus Garvey believed that he is the one in his mind who has the right, I guess, conception or idea of what the quintessential Negro is supposed to look like, act like, and conduct himself like. He knows. You don't know what is in your best interest. You as a so-called Negro. I guess if you don't act in accordance with how Marcus Garvey thinks that you should act, then you're not a standard Negro. So I wonder if someone with the personality of Marcus Garvey, I wonder what they would do if they had the political authority to punish those or coerce those, who refuse to walk in line with his ideas of what is proper and what is improper. He literally called himself a fascist. Here he goes. We, the two organizations, he's talking about the UNIA and the Anglo-Saxon Clubs of America, we, the two organizations, should work together for the purpose of bringing about the ideal sort, about the ideal sought, I'm sorry. We should work together for the purpose of bringing about the ideal sought, which is the purification of the races, their autonomous separation, and the unbridled freedom of self-development and self-expression. Those who are against this are enemies of both races and rebels against morality, nature, and God.
Hold on one second. So, and I got to mute you to not have the echo, but so Marcus Garvey basically agreed with what we would call white supremacy. He agreed with segregation. He basically agreed with everything that black folks claim they don't like, which is the white supremacists, KKK, Anglo-Saxons Club, all them, and then also separating the races, and then also no light-skinned people. So again, when he says a standard, I guess a standard Negro, my idea goes to communism, because if you're talking about having a standard for a black person, then that means you want all these black people to act a certain way. How do you get black folks to be a standard as a people if it's not by force? You would have to force them to be this robotic like Negro, I guess, a Negro bot.
Well, fascism, you see the troops, you see them marching, you see them in uniform, all in lockstep, all for the sake of the race. Garvey was a totalitarian in the sense that he simply saw his praxis at the point of the state and the race. You get what I'm saying? As opposed to, say, for example, the class, right? But go back to what Judge Joe Brown, he saw things solely in terms of economics. It's not true at all. Matter of fact, this quote goes on. He says, I unhesitatingly endorse the race purity idea of Mr. Powell. He's talking about John Powell. If you are unfamiliar or interested, look up John Powell. John Powell and his organization, and I have pledged my moral support to their program in that direction, expecting of the honorable and honest of his race the same regard and support from ours. So, people say, they trying to smear Garvey because Garvey was simply responding to white supremacy. It was like, all right, well, if you don't like us, then we're fine. And we'll just go get our own then. But who is Marcus Garvey to tell me, who I can and who I cannot, marry or sleep with, or have sex with, who I should spend my money with, and who I should go into business with, and so on and so forth. No, it's Africa for the Africans. And you be damned if you do otherwise. Why? Because Marcus Garvey said so.
Somebody mentioned in the comments that they said this guy sounds like Hitler, which would make sense because he claims that he was the one that, I guess, influenced them. So what he's saying is pretty much, it sounds like what the images that we see of Hitler with the Nazis and everybody in, lock and step uniform. To me, that might have been his vision for black people, to be this unified monolith of a people. My question is, who's going to be the leader? Who's going to be this person to lead this monolithic, these Negro bots into the free world?
Him. That's who. Him. He says of his UNI organization, we were the first fascists. He went on to claim that we had 100,000 disciplined men and were training children. Mussolini was still unknown. Mussolini copied our fascism. And of course, fascism, the word fasce stems from the concept of a, it's funny because, when you see the fish, you think about, you think communism. But the word fascism, it means the exact same thing. It means to bundle. Or if you see like the symbol of fascism is always the bundle of sticks with the axe on the top. Because you take one stick, you can break a stick. You put two sticks, it's a little tougher. You put them all together, right? They're hard to break. It's sort of like your separate fingers on a hand. When you come together, you make a fist. It's like what Big Mama said in Soul Food. You put your fingers together, you make a fist, you strike a mighty blow. Fascism is the same concept. You bring all the bundles of the sticks together. It makes it hard to break the collective when everyone comes together. But come together on the basis of what? And who's going to keep those people together? Coming together on the basis of race, according to Marcus Garvey. That's what I refer to as pre-civilizational tribalism. That undercuts and undermines the very concept of the citizen. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. The very concept of the word civilization derives from the word citizen, civis. It's a Roman term. And civis was a concept and a word that was exclusive to the property owning class of the Greek city state, the polis, where we get the word politic, politician, and police. And so mind you, so this all it all goes back to this attack on property, this attack on the middle class, this attack on people having the freedom and the autonomy and the sovereignty to do what thou wilt with their things, acting in accordance with what they deem to be ethical. And how the society is going to look is based upon the set of values and how the individuals within the collective view their sense of virtue and duty. And race is a superior is an inferior impulse to the higher ideal of the spiritual community in the body of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So just like what you said, Blanche, atheism is at the heart of all of this, but I digress.
So it sounds like to me that in Marcus Garvey's, just based on his labor practices, based on him not really being concerned with how much money people made, I'm going to assume that he didn't care about people owning things. And I'm also going to assume that he would want people to put the goal of the people in front of their own individual goals. But to me, he just had a slicker way of communism, because everything he's saying lines up with like everything, even to the point where he says we got to even make the race pure and not even deal with any light-skinned people. It's funny, it sounds like Umar Johnson of today, where he says you can't marry outside your race. So it's communism, because you're telling me we all have to be the same. And again, I asked you when you said it, who's going to lead these Negro bots into the free world? And it's going to be Marcus Garvey.
So let me tell you, so Marcus Garvey had this concept of what he called the ideal state. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly what he means by the ideal state. Now, you tell me if this man isn't a dictator. He says, we have tried various forms, where he's talking about government, but none have measured up to the ideal state. Communism was the last attempt, and its most ardent advocates have acknowledged its limitations, shortcomings, and impossibility. Naturally, the state cannot govern itself. It finds expression and executes its edicts through individuals. Hence, the state is human. Its animation is but the reflex of our human characteristics. Okay, cool. I'm good. I'm with all that. But here this way goes off the rails. If we must correct the maladministration of the state and apply the corporate majesty of the people to their own good, then we must reach the source and there reorganize and reform. Governments, he says, should be absolute, and the head should be thoroughly responsible for himself and the acts of his subordinates. When we elect a president of a nation, he should be endowed with absolute authority to appoint all of his lieutenants, from cabinet ministers, governors of states and territories, administrators, and judges to minor officers. So wait a minute. So there's no delegation, there's no legislative checks on the authority of the chief executive. Can you imagine if you lived in a country where the president of the United States got to pick your governors? Is this man insane? Sounds like it to me. He should swear his life as a guarantee to the state and the people. He should be made to pay the price of such a life if he deceives, grabs, bows to special interests, privileges, or in any way undermines the sacred honor and trust imposed upon him by acts of favoritism, injustice, or friendly or self-interest. He should be the soul of honor, and when he is illegally, when he is legally or properly found to be contrary, he should be publicly disgraced and put to death as an outcast and an unworthy representative of the righteous will of the people. So you wonder why? See, you know, when I talk about when you talk about Garvey, I talked about in the last show. I brought up men like Patrice Lumumba. I also brought up Kwame Nkrumah, who was a big influencer in the final year of Malcolm X. Kwame Nkrumah was heavily influenced by Marcus Garvey and a lot of these Afro-Marxist African dictators during the post-colonial period or during the independence fervor of the decolonization period of the early 20th century, when these various European nation-state empires began to recede. You had so many what they call them African strongmen, coming to power all across the African continent because they were following the dictates of, or the example that was left behind by predominantly Marcus Garvey. That's how dictators govern. That's not a republic. Garvey didn't believe in small r republicanism. He believed that the federal government, or what we would call a federal government here in the United States, should be absolute, and that everything that comes downstream from the president of the United States should be appointed by him. And if he gets out of step with that, he should be overthrown and put to death. You wonder why you can't, see, Toussaint Louverture, all of that. You wonder why there's no stability. There's no, that's why our framers created a society that checks and balances, vertical and horizontal integration. The gears of changes, the wheels of changes are meant to move slowly. Our government was designed so that it could gridlock itself. They wanted the government to remain gridlocked. And the only time, of course, that change is supposed to happen. And I hear y'all groaning right now. Man, we doing I know we don't went off the rails, and that's why Blanche and I are here, and you all are here in the chat, because we're the ones who are trying to bring it back. Okay. But Garvey had no such fidelity to constitutional government at all. At all. He believed in the ideal state. But how can the state be ideal when human beings aren't ideal? But that's right. Marcus Garvey thought that he could create ideal human beings. And how was he going to do that? By purifying the race.
Now, some of you all's minds might be blown, but Marcus Garvey literally just said that the ideal state is where the person in charge, this was America, let's say Joe Biden would have the power to pick every important position of government across the United States. One person. So imagine Joe Biden having that much power to where he can pick all the governors, all the mayors, all the judges, all the congressmen, all of the Senate members. Like, just imagine if Joe Biden had that much power, what he would do with it. So Marcus Garvey even suggesting that a one man should have absolute power lets you know at his core, he is a communist. Because how would you get people to buy into this idea if it wasn't by force, because he's totally excluded human nature, even to the point where I believe he would force dark-skinned people to procreate with just dark-skinned people, and the light-skinned people, they may be sterilized. You know, I'm just imagining all kind of things that this guy would have in his head to make this quote-unquote pure race that was loyal to the state. He sounds like a communist to me.
But see that, you know, that's what you know, that's and again, that's what they call fascism or Nazism. Remember, you know, everybody knows, you know, the term Nazi stands for National Socialist. Real quick, just to give you guys a little background history, okay? Vladimir Lenin, I don't remember what his born name was, because that wasn't his born name. V.I. Lenin is what he eventually became known as, because that's the pen name or pseudonym that he would write under while in exile. Vladimir Lenin, sometime during the early 1900s, was diagnosed with a stomach ailment. I believe he had tuberculosis of the stomach. Vladimir Lenin would travel abroad. He would travel to Switzerland to seek out medical care. While abroad, traveling throughout Europe, he ran into another fellow Russian national in Germany who was a political exile by the name of George Plekhanov. George Plekhanov was the political mentor of Vladimir Lenin. And it was George Plekhanov that told Vladimir Lenin, or gave him the instruction, to go back into Russia and start up a political party similar to the Social Democrats of Germany. So in Vladimir Lenin's mind, in the beginning, he sought to create a socialist party modeled after the one he saw in Germany. This is the same socialist, social democrats, as they were called. These were the same social democrats that Adolf Hitler would soon go on to become the head of by 1921, 1922. Hitler was the head of that party. Vladimir Lenin, the example for his Bolsheviks, was the one he seen being created by the leftist social democrats in Germany. So they were modeled after the Germans. So like you said, Blanche, it's all the same. Thanks, Rick Hempstead. He just put Vladimir Lenin's his born name in the chat for those of you who don't know. I can never remember it because the Russian names be kind of getting me sometimes. But yeah, it's funny because a lot of these communists, they're never known by their born names. Ho Chi Minh, that wasn't his born name. Pol Pot, that wasn't his born name. Leon Trotsky, that wasn't his born name. Leon Trotsky, that was his slave name, by the way. You know, his jailer's name was Trotsky. He took his name and he used his ID card to sneak out of Siberia. Leon Trotsky's born name was Lev Bernstein. But anyway, I'm just ranting right now. But I say all this to say that, you know, fascism, and this is why, if you go back to the first part of the discussion when we introduced a lot of these philosophies and we were talking about Marcus Garvey, fascism and communism are one and the same. D Blade 4, what is the extent and impact of cronyism compared to communism in America, and which passes a greater challenge to our constitutional? But that's a good question, man. I listened to. I'm gonna answer that, Blanche. I don't know if you got a response for it, but D Blade 4 asked a question last time, and I listened back to the show, and I didn't really like my answer when he asked what was the synthesis between capitalism and communism. Well, capitalism is the ideology that justifies the existence of capital, which is a certain type of property. The thesis and the antithesis within the context of capitalism is, of course, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And Marx had this very Malthusian attitude toward nature in the material world, right? Seeing as how material resources are finite, the more and more capitalists accumulate for themselves, the more and more that property would be amassed in the hands of the few, and the more and more that the labor class would expand, this would lead to the eventual synthesis from the stage of capitalism, which would of course be socialism. And then once the state commandeered all the resources from the private sector, then the state would wither away and die. So I guess the thesis and the antithesis within the context of socialism would be, I guess, the state and the proletariat, I suppose. And then that would lead to the final phase of capitalism. That's a better way to kind of describe it, to kind of answer that question. But man, that's a good question, D Blade. I mean, shoot, right, fool. I mean, it's crazy because it's kind of like both, right? You know what I mean? We got the cronyism going on in America, and then we got, we may not have, yeah, we do have a lot of like Marxism in the more traditional sense. We start talking about, I guess, purely economics, but we dealing with, communism on the cultural front. And then you got cronyism going on with, big tech and government, how they're, outsourcing their tyranny. And I don't know, man, just pick your poison. I can't really pick one over the other. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to say.
I would say this, right? So we know with like communism, you're not gonna have a choice. Cronyism could be something up to the individual, whether somebody has a company and they may do it or they may not do it. So with cronyism, you might have a chance, but with communism, it's pretty much set in stone. You're not going to have it. You won't have the opportunity to be a crony, if that makes sense. So I'm always going to go with having a choice. If I got to pick which one, I'm gonna pick which one is not the one set in stone when it comes to anything economic. But we can agree that when it comes to communism, that not only comes with limited choices, but it also comes with torture. It also comes with lack. It also comes with oppression. Like, it also comes with a whole bunch of other things. So it's not just, me hiring friends and family or putting somebody in positions based on who I like and don't like. But we know that communism is pretty much a death blow.
D Blade, when D Blade said cronyism, this is how I interpreted it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is cronyism, which you just explained, Branch. Cronyism, nepotism. But when we're talking about cronyism, man, we're talking about, all of these, woke, as they call them, corporations, seeking to sort of saddle itself up, next to the state, so that, these companies have special protections against the pitfalls of the free market. You have these folks who are trying to eliminate the possibility that someone out there somewhere in the world has the next great idea that is going to render their business model obsolete. We've seen it time and time again. But now when you have the political sector putting such a squeeze on the citizen, putting such a squeeze on the individual, it is making it extremely hard for people to innovate and to challenge the Walmarts of the world, to challenge the Amazons of the world. And it's not that they're making it extremely hard because, they're willing to sort of scratch the backs. The leftists in government are willing to scratch the backs of the leftists, within the business and corporate sector, just so long as they, you can see the reciprocal relationship between, corporate America and the political left. And so when he says cronyism, that's sort of like what I think about. And then, and communism just, is communism. So,
Well, if you put it like that, then I would say that communism is a sprint and cronyism is a marathon, because eventually cronyism would probably eventually end up being communism. Once enough of those people got into positions of power, then it would they would lock everybody out. So I guess they are probably one and the same, just one's going to take a longer time to get there.
So while we on this topic, when we talking about, I just want to read. I think it's a good time for me to read. This is, and I know you probably got to go soon, Blanche. So I'm gonna be done. Marcus Garvey. This is from his 1929 manifesto. his People's Party. Again, by 1929, he was in Jamaica at this point in time. He had been deported after his sentence had been commuted for wire fraud by President Calvin Coolidge. But these are some of the plans, just to kind of make it nice and concise, of his People's Party. Some of the points were protection of native labor. Okay. Minimum wage. So he wanted a minimum wage. Remember what Garvey was saying about the unions now. He wanted a minimum wage. He wanted a maximum wage. Workers' compensation. These are all left-wing political. It doesn't matter what country you're in, whatever. I mean, these are all, hardcore left-wing policy items. This is Garvey now. An 8-hour working day. So people shouldn't work longer than 8 hours a day, even if you want to. Should be illegal. Federal infrastructure fund. This sound like the Democrat Party of today. Compulsory private infrastructure fund. Local industry fund. Federal legal aid fund. Land naturalization. So we're using to land. What that is this fancy way of saying government on land confiscation. Naturalization of public utilities. He wanted the government to own all public utilities. So imagine if you got on the wrong side of the government. No water for you, no electricity for you. Land conservation and park naturalization. He wanted universal education. He wanted a national center for the performing arts. He wanted an impeachment law for unjust judges. And lastly, he wanted union financing of political campaigns. Union financing for political campaigns. Even men like FDR thought that public unions and their relationship to politicians, particularly progressive politicians, by then in the Democrat Party, even FDR thought that that was a bridge too far. We know how extreme FDR was, but those are some of Marcus Garvey's political policy items for his party. I'm reading from this article here. It also says, this person who wrote this says, when we compare these policies to the evolutionary platforms of many of the many students of Garveyism, such as Sankara, Lumumba, Nkrumah, etc., because here's some typos in this article too. This guy, he didn't read. A 1-to-1 correlation is seen solidifying 1929 People's Party Manifesto as the starting point of modern anti-imperialist resistance in the African world. This is just Afro-Marxist tripe. This is a quote from Garvey. 3,000 years ago, Black men excelled in government and were the founders and teachers of art, science, and literature. The power and sway we once held passed away. But now in the 20th century, we are about to see a return of it in the rebuilding of Africa. Yes, a new civilization, a new culture shall spring up from among our people, and the Nile shall once more flow through the land of science, art, and literature, wherein will live Black men of the highest learning and the highest accomplishments. Mind you, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, all of them spoke like this. All of them talk like this. They didn't just come up and say, man, if you don't do something, we're going to toss your head, execute you, murder you. No, they all sold their plans with these lofty goals and lofty expectations. Again, this is Garvey in 1929.
And you know what? I think to me, the evil intent is, if I get all these Black folks to go to a foreign land, they're not going to have any choice but to do this. Like, think about it. They're not going to have any other options. If you over there, you don't own anything, you don't know what's, like, you'll be stuck over there. And this guy will be telling you, okay, this is the way to, we're going to do things right now. We're going to purify the race. We're going to, government's going to control everything, and I'm going to be in charge.
I even pulled up some quotes I pulled because, I know we all are familiar with the King's MLK. MLK was the recipient. He, alongside Lyndon B. Johnson and a couple others, were recipients of the inaugural Margaret Sanger Award. You hear people try and defend Malcolm X, try and say, well, Planned Parenthood is trying to co-opt his legacy and this, that, and the third. Of course, we all know, or maybe we don't, but Coretta Scott King, his wife, accepted the award on his behalf. And the only reason why I felt to mention this again, because socialism, eugenics, all of this stuff is all cobbled together. Margaret Sanger, I don't know if she was ever officially a member of the Communist Party, but she was a fellow traveler because she took a trip to the Soviet Union to see the new land of progressivism. And she loved it. She glowed and gushed about the Soviet Union. And Margaret Sanger was, too, of course, a member of a group called the Women's Socialist Party of New York. She loved the Soviet Union. So when you start talking about eugenics, so what we're talking about, statism, we're just talking about planning. You know what I mean? And so for people out there that try to confuse us or want to confuse you guys and try to, it's just anti-God, anti-freedom. The devil comes in many disguises, and no matter how they try to dress it up, it's anti-freedom, it's anti-God, it's anti-human. It's really that simple. But that's why I felt the need to bring up Margaret Sanger and King, because they were economic socialists along with their, I guess, partiality to eugenicists and women like Margaret Sanger. Here is Coretta Scott King. This is just a part of the comments she made during her acceptance speech. She says that there is a striking kinship between our movement and Margaret Sanger's early efforts. Margaret Sanger, I guess she talked about how the whole point and goal of her movement was to try and end poverty. So how do you end poverty? I don't know. You just kill all the broke folk, all the poor folk. You just kill them, and there you go. Poverty problem solved. Our sure beginning in the struggle for equality by nonviolent direct action may not have been resolute without the tradition established by Margaret Sanger and people like her. Those are Coretta Scott King's comments about Margaret Sanger. She also went on to say that because of her I am proud to say a word in behalf of your mentor and the person who symbolizes the ideals of the organization, Margaret Sanger. This is, I think it was 1966, 66, 67. Because of her dedication, her deep convictions, and for her suffering for what she believed in, I would like to say that I am proud to be a woman tonight. That's Coretta Scott King, y'all, talking about Margaret Sanger. You muted, Blanche.
And you're not going to convince me that Coretta Scott King didn't know what Margaret Sanger was. I'm not going to. We're not going there because Margaret Sanger was talking crazy for a long time, so everybody knew what she was about. So we're not going to even act like she was naive and we play this game. She knew. But the funny thing is, a lot of these Black folks agree with this rhetoric because they agree with an elite class of Black people. They agree with not wanting to consort with the undesirable Black people. So that this rhetoric resonates with a lot of quote unquote Black folks that made it. I guess what Du Bois would call that talented tent. I think Du Bois said that who would be the people of the ruling class in Marcus Garvey's perfect utopia? It would be him and the people that he selected. It would be, you know what I'm saying? So it's no due process. It's just me and the folks I like, and then y'all got to suffer the consequence.
And by breeding out the feeble, and you hear with the white eugenicists, progressives, they talk, breeding out the handicapped, the weak, the feeble-minded. That's a word you hear a lot. Marcus Garvey was no different. He was just a Black version of it. And before I go, I pulled out this quote But I think this hits the nail on the head. Because, again, I say this because you always hear the left talking all this stuff about fascism and whatnot. I got I think it was an hour and a half, and I could have went longer, discussion and lecture on my YouTube channel about the philosophical roots of fascism. And I got into some of it last week on the part one breakdown when we approached this discussion about Marcus Garvey, about how fascism and communism have the same philosophical roots. It all comes from Hegel and Marx. I mentioned Bella Dodd last week in her quote about fascism and communism. But guys, if you want to really know and really learn about communism and get to the root of it, there's one man who's essential in studying. I know people like Rick Hempstead, stimulated students, saying some of my brothers in the chat that's real sharp. And not to knock anybody else in the chat, but I know you'll know this man. And this is a quote from the great man, Cleon Skousen, W. Cleon Skousen to be exact. And this is what W. Cleon Skousen says of fascism and communism. I feel that I have to put this quote on the record before we get out of here. And this is Cleon Skousen talking about Joseph Stalin and Joseph Stalin's attitude towards Hitler. This is what he says. Cleon Skousen says, Stalin recognized in the Nazi dictator a formidable opponent of his own breed and kind. He saw that Hitler was shrewd and ruthless. He was completely amoral. He had no compunction whatsoever against violence, the purging of his own people, the use of deceit and propaganda, nor the sacrifice of millions of lives to achieve personal power. Materialism had produced precisely the same product in Germany that it had produced in Russia. Although called by different names, Nazism and communism were aimed at the same identical mark and were forged in very similar ideological molds. And he's right. They're the same. They're the same thing. Moscow saw itself as the motherland of Soviet, Soviet is just another way of it means council. So you had these little workers, a council all throughout the Soviet. They were a union of Soviets, a union of workers' councils. And, in order for communism to fully work the way it should, all of the liberal democracies, all the capitalist democracies had to be toppled. And it was from within the motherland of Sovietism, the Soviet Union, that it should use its military might to subdue the bourgeois in every country all over the world. The problem between the Germans and the Soviets all came down to who was going to run it. Hitler wanted to set up this fascist Aryan sort of based empire, and the Soviets wanted to do a more international class-based model. But it's the same thing. It's the same modality and methodology, just a different sort of hierarchy of purpose. One was race, the other was class. The other believed in the primacy of the state. The other believed that the state was only a necessary evil towards a final phase of a classless society. But at the root of it was this dialectical progression toward the end of history, which was bolstered by the age of new industry and the popularity in the 1800s of the doctrine of materialism and the evolutionary theory that was promulgated by Charles Darwin. That's the milieu out of which this whole atheistic, communistic, fascist movement grew out of. It's all
hold on one second. So, let me thank Chandri Smalley for the super sticker. Let me just go through it. Thank you, Angel, for the super sticker. Sneakerhead, Dead or Alive for the super sticker. Sticker. Rick Hempstead, thank you for the super sticker. And Starve Baby, preaching and teaching, only way we're gonna learn. Thank y'all for the super sticker. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
Nah, man. I mean, that's pretty much it, man. That's pretty much the gist of it, man. I want to keep you all night, man. I just brought like a couple of my books out. I said I brought the Opinions of Philosophy of Marcus Garvey. This is another interesting work right here. This is a book on Cornel West, written by Rosemary Cowan, where she gets into Cornel West's beliefs, his liberatory, what is it called? His emancipatory Christianity, and his democratic socialism, and reimagining of Karl Marx. And so I pulled a lot of stuff out, man, to get prepared for this talk. When you called me out on your live stream, we sitting here kicking it, we talking, and then, man, we're trying to cram a whole semester's worth of information in just a couple hours. It's dang near impossible to do. But I think we probably put out enough breadcrumbs to kind of get people's minds going. So yeah, and lastly, I guess I'll say this. And Marx was, the whole concept that man was merely. See, the thing was that man was simply a byproduct of his material circumstances, but given the fact that by way of chance, by way of cosmic accident, man had developed a conscious, man should take it upon himself to accelerate the process toward something more desirable. Because Marx was writing and prophesizing during the age of the Industrial Revolution. Remember, go back to last week when Richard Spencer was talking to Roland Martin, and Richard Spencer was talking about how, but the Industrial Revolution that started in Europe. That's when Richard Spencer was right. That's why Karl Marx prophesied that communism would come where? He thought that it would come first to England and Germany, because England and Germany were the global economic hegemons at the time. It wasn't the United States. It was the British Empire, and it was Germany, were the two most powerful economic countries in the world, right? And Marx said that, well, since man has now become conscious of his place within the cosmic scheme of things, then he must accelerate the process. Because why have to deal with the suffering? Because with the Industrial Revolution came urbanization, and what Marx saw in urbanization was a lot of social decay, a lot of breakdown, a lot of displacement, because there were a lot of changes and stuff like that were going on. But Karl Marx could not foresee that, things were going to get better. He thought that as a result of the massive, I guess, the shock to the system that was the Industrial Revolution, he thought that, man, things only get worse from here. So we have to accelerate the collapse of this particular system, because we have to phase ourselves out of it. And again, considering the fact that, and I said this on Cutting Through the Culture last week, that Marx became a crackpot economist, but he was originally an atheist. And it was the work of men like Ludwig Feuerbach that cemented his atheism. But Marx had to come up with a rationale to explain what ultimately motivates man's behavior. If he is not abiding by some supernaturally bestowed ethical code, then what makes man tick? What makes him do the things that he does? Well, man is driven by material comfort. He wants shelter. He wants food. He wants comfortability. And man then comes up with an ethical code to justify the economic system that he creates once a certain group of individuals have privileged themselves by successfully taming the natural environment. And so
in other words, we'll provide the food, and the shelter, and the clothing. We'll provide your human comforts, and then in return, your loyalty is to the state. Because if we're giving you everything that you need, then it should be a no-brainer that you all should serve the state.
Marx believed that the state was, I guess, the state was a necessary evil. The state was an appendage of the property owning class. It wasn't so much that the state is going to give you what you need and what you want. Once the state has liquidated the property holdings of the bourgeoisie, once their property has been confiscated, then the state is going to allocate the spoils of the society as it sees fit. It's going to implement its own version of social justice. But once no one has the right to own property, conflict would cease to be in the world, because like we said last week, Blanche, property is the source of conflict. So just like as Christians, when they say that when Eve partook of the forbidden fruit, that's when sin entered the world. According to a Marxist, sin entered the world when, man came up with this radical idea of private ownership. Private property is the source of all sin. Private property is the source of all evil. And if there is no private property, there is no sin, no evil, no conflict. Therefore, why do you need a government? Why do you need a police force? Why do you need an army? Everybody would get along. It's crap, but people crazy, man. But
in the instance that it didn't get along and they didn't comply, you would have something in place to, I guess that's where the gulags come into place. You put all the folks who don't want to follow the rules.
There you go. Yep. People are going to, Marx knew that his ideas were radical. He knew that people were going to resist it. So there's only one way you can do this, and that's through violence. That's through violence, repression, and and terror. It's the only way. That's why I say, just to bring it back full circle to Marcus Garvey, don't ever think for a second that a man like Marcus Garvey would be above such measures, because he would do the exact same thing. Remember, going back to what Skousen said of Stalin's views of Hitler, that he had no compunction whatever against violence, the purging of his own people, the use of deceit and propaganda, nor the sacrifice of millions of lives to achieve personal power. Materialism, atheism, Darwinism had produced precisely the same product in Germany that it had in Russia. Although called by different names, Nazism and communism were aimed at the same identical mark and were forged in very similar ideological molds. So when you say, Blanche, you be on your lives, I listened to your last live and you was like, man, all our black leaders were communists. Marcus Garvey is no different. Matter of fact, he may be the worst.
The irony of all this is he was the worst. He's actually the most radical, if you think about it. And he's also the most cunning, because he hid all of this stuff in, quote unquote, the liberation of black people. So I don't even think that people like Judge Joe Brown and the other girl on the show even have the understanding of the nuance of even what he's even saying. Like what we're breaking down, most of these folks can't even dissect, because they're not even all they're seeing is Marcus Garvey for black people. Meanwhile, he's saying, I'm gonna have a situation where I'm gonna pick everybody top to bottom, and if you all don't adhere to what I'm doing, it's gonna cost you. And if you better not be light skinned. So Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, they'd be in trouble,
Well, Well, nah, man. You know that's just we part of the Boule branch. Blanche. That's what it is. You know that's why we trying to discredit Garvey because we in the Boule. I don't know, man. That's why I say I don't even deal with the foolish. I don't even deal with the sensationalism at the end of the day because we still we still have to exist. You know, what I'm saying, such as we are as human beings in a world that has meaning, right? And so with that being said, the question still becomes, and I've said this 1,000 times, it's becoming like my motto: how do we, as a collective, organize a society where we can mitigate the disastrous consequences of our own selfish impulses and desires? Because we're all different. We all want different things. We are disparately talented. Tall, some taller, some shorter, some ugly, some pretty, some fat, some skinny, some fast, some slow, some intelligent, some not so intelligent, some funny, some not. I mean, how do you get all of those people together and expect them to share this sort of finite space and have any semblance of civility whatsoever? You know, it's not an easy proposition. So as much as folk love to talk about this group or that group or this secret society and that secret society, if you got rid of every ruling elite group, every secret, if you got rid of them today, another group of folk would take their place tomorrow because they're not the issue. Because the Rothschild family, the Rockefeller family, they need salvation just as much as I do, man. You know what I mean? Because when you sit there and you point the finger at them and say, well, I'm just a cog in the machine, you know what I mean? And what obligation do you have to act in accordance with, again, what is moral and what is decent? You don't, as long as you can point the finger at somebody else. That's what I call conservative utopianism. I don't buy that either because I hear a lot of conservatives saying that, pointing the finger at this group and that group, this secret society, this, that. Life just doesn't work that way. It's far more complicated than that. You know what I mean? And without the ruling elite, as they call them, we will still have problems, man. So what are you going to do? What do you actually know? What do you actually believe in? And if we took the world and just wiped the slate clean today, and again, this is for the Umar Johnsons of the world, all the way to the so-called conservative social media influencer. If we wiped the slate clean today and gave that individual the responsibility for creating a new world, what would they do? I see a lot of conservatives, they know how to post memes and make fun of drag queens, but what do you actually know about anything? Anyway, let me get off my high horse, man, because I got a whole thing about conservatives and how they need to step their game up because a lot of so-called conservatives, y'all content is weak, man. Y'all content is weak. But anyway, that's just my little rant.
A lot of conservative content is just surface level reaction to what's going on. They don't really have any type of it's just surface level talking points, like, and again, they almost try to ride on the wave of the people, I don't know, kind of like the folks that'll get it will get it. I'm trying to appeal to the decent, quote unquote, American, and I do understand it, but they're just not savvy though. You know what I mean? They're not like, I don't know, that it's just, I don't know. It's like a bad team, it's just like a bland off.
Man. Yeah. But yeah, they don't know, man. I don't know. Y'all be the judge. Y'all heard me and Blanche. Well, I've been doing most of the talking. I'm sorry, Blanche, but we've been up here for 3 hours.
Oh yeah, it's time to go.
Y'all be the judge. When we talk about Marcus Garvey being slandered, Marcus Garvey being smeared, and this and that. And but again, during his time, there were members of his organization that were like, okay, this is a bridge too far. Oftentimes, Garvey would have to write letters from prison to give his imprimatur and grant his permission for a lot of these white supremacists groups and you know, members of these organizations like John Powell to, you know, commandeer space in his institutions to posit their ideas about racial purity and what have you. Because a lot of folk were beginning to rebel against Garvey because they didn't like it. You know, they didn't like the idea of it. So, you know, nobody had to smear Garvey. He smeared himself. He told you what he believed in. Nobody had to smear him.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Well,
thank you, Chuck, for coming on. People in here talking about D Blaze said Marcus Garvey would have got him out of here because he light skinned, and then Synergy Strength said, you know, she had to work in the field, or he had to work in the field some more till he got dark enough.
Look, straight up into a slippery slope, bro. That's how things like that happen. That's how genocides happen, man. That's how they happen. We've seen genocides in various parts of the world, various peoples, you know, for various reasons, you know, carry out protracted systemic what do you call it, campaigns to exterminate a certain group. You've seen it numerous times. You've seen it. So yeah, it can happen, man. It can happen, man. You ain't dark enough, bro. You got to go. We gotta, yeah.
It's funny because they did a reverse of the bag taste.
Again, and Garvey said, dang, if I had to quote, man, but Garvey, like I said, he even said it, man. He talked about, just go, y'all can find it, all the stuff Marcus Garvey said about mulattoes and how they hurt the race and how they try to double dip and man, what? Anyway, man, y'all can find it. Y'all can find it. He didn't like that. He didn't want, and it was difficult. And this is another one of the reasons why he teamed up with the eugenicists in Virginia, most notably because of their attempt to prevent blacks and whites from what's the word? What's the copulating, having sex? You know, they tried to. It was difficult to enforce that law because, you know, sex is such a private act. How do you police that? But nevertheless, they tried. It's called the Racial Integrity Act, and Garvey supported it.
Yeah, Garvey is yeah, I mean, he's worse than a communist. And I say that because he's been able to hide, even in his death, he's been able to hide all of this. Like, he's literally like an iconic figure. And I'm just wondering, does Great Value Garvey know any of this stuff? I don't think he does. I don't think he does.
I don't know, man. I didn't even know who that cat was till I seen him on so I seen you do that breakdown when he was talking about Pearl. I didn't even know who that cat was, man. With that turtleneck and that weak chain he had on. I don't know, man.
No, he don't. He doesn't know. He has not done what you've done. But again, I think that even if he read the book 100 times, what you picked out is just flying over his head because he's just so focused on the blackness and the liberation and the kings and queens and the getting at the white. Like, he's so into that to where all that stuff is not owning property, wage maximum, you know, all that kind of stuff ain't even. He just sound like a good idea.
Yeah, because no matter what, you know what I mean. People are inherently different. Like D. Blade Ford said in the chat, you know what I mean. Inequality is the price of freedom. You know, you can have freedom or you can have equality, but you can't have both. You know, it's the example of the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. You know, the American Revolution stressed freedom, whereas the French Revolution stressed equality, which led to the infamous Reign of Terror. So even if you have a group of all black people, there's still going to be inequality amongst them because human beings are inherently different. And when you take a bunch of black folk, they're going to find, because see, in order to have, and this is why communism is this ongoing, they call themselves progressive as well to try and hide. It's this ongoing progressive march. Why? Because they can never allow for stability. Because whenever stability exists, what happens as a result, in effect, is the building organically of a hierarchy of values, so that the people within the context of the hierarchy know what it is that they ought to, the skills or merit, should I say, that they ought to cultivate in order to reap the rewards for their membership to the group. Right, it's all about what the group values. You know, if you play sports well, then you get rewarded. If you are good looking and you take good care of your body, you get rewarded. Or if you're intelligent, you know, we reward intelligence. We reward certain things. And so, you know, there's a hierarchy of intelligence, the hierarchy of looks, there's a hierarchy of all sorts of things, right? So we reward people who are good at doing the things that we place value on. That's the value hierarchy, and the value hierarchy is what brings stability. This is why Marxism is, anytime that you see all of this fat shaming and body positivity and all of that stuff is Marxism, because they're trying to completely eviscerate the line and totally wipe the society clean of any semblance of standards. Without standards, there's no values. Without values, there's no stability. Without stability, there is no society, which is what they want, complete and total societal destruction. And D. Blade asked the question about the World Economic Forum and communism. I know when we talk about communism, we're talking about Klaus Schwab, or we think of Klaus Schwab, we think of World Economic Forum. And yes, you know, Klaus Schwab is in fact a communist. He learned, he was taught the doctrine of Marxism by a Brazilian priest by the name of Hilder Camara. Some of you in the chat are probably familiar with him, Archbishop Hilder Camara. And I know I'm not pronouncing it exactly correctly, because, you know, he's Brazilian, and, you know, my Portuguese is bad. But yeah, he learned Marxism from a Catholic priest named Archbishop Camara. So anyway, man, y'all gonna keep me here all night.
No, we don't. Thank you so much for coming on, Chuck. Thank y'all for tuning in. I thought it was a great show. We really uncovered that Mr. Garvey, Marcus, Moham, what is his middle name? Mohim.
Mosiah.
My bad. Marcus Mosiah, ironically, Garvey. He really got exposed for who he is. And the irony of it is, none of this stuff was slander. It was his own words. We just basically took what he said, and what he said not just lines up with communism, but actually, in order progressive Democrats, it also lines up with his global agenda. His goal for quote unquote black people is no different than what these elite people want to do for all of humanity, which is basically one citizen, one government, one mind, one religion. Well, no religion, but all that. Anything else you want to say, Chuck?
And the good news about all that is, you know, I don't know, how long. I mean, as the saying goes, it may get bad it may get worse before it gets better. But the good news is that, like we said last time, Blanche, many of men have tried to bring the world under one form or one system of rule, from Napoleon to Alexander the Great to Julius Caesar to Nimrod, and no one has ever been able to accomplish it. So ultimately, the New World Order, they're going to fail.
Yeah.
The question only becomes, how much destruction will they cause before it's all over? That's the only question. But they will fail. That's all I got.
And I think that's a perfect way to end. They will fail. Thank y'all for tuning in today. Thank you, Chuck, for coming on. Thank y'all for the super stickers. Thank you all for the commentary and everything. Really appreciate it. And we will see y'all this Sunday on Cutting Through the Culture. at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Would be me, myself, Chuck, Chado, and Keisha King. Thank y'all, and we will see y'all soon.
Peace out, y'all.